sister. He would not forget when she touched it, when she used it. There was a woman to admire, he remembered thinking. It was that hope he'd see it again did he decide to speak of it. It was when I escorted you back to the tower. He saw the way her mouth turned, her hand on his arm, instinctively tightened, and something sparked behind her eyes. My father's shame, Daeron quickly said, realizing it was probably a mistake to speak on that part. Fool. He put a hand on hers to try to calm her. He may be king, but he had no right. She regarded him, her mouth turning downwards into something that looked like a snarl. The spark that he had seen beneath her eyes only seemed to darken as she studied him. The prince is kind. He knew at once the chance was gone. He had botched it. I cannot even get this right. It was her delivery that stood out to him. 7 hells, is that what I've sounded like? For the first time, he felt disappointment at his behavior. Even rising above the constant bitterness he held towards her due to how she treated him in the past. No, not treat, the voice inside him said. Imploring him to remember the old grievances. It was a relentless beast. Treat would require her giving you attention. She practically ignored you while drooling for Rhaegar. You were a speck that she was indifferent to. She'd flick you before she'd look at you. The reminder of that feast playing in his head. Her glazed look. Her simpering words for his brother. How she ignored all of them, just so that she could stare silently at Rhaegar. He nearly wanted to sneer at her at how she was to him. No apology, no acknowledgement, as if she had done nothing wrong. Your brother doesn't want you. Your betrothed doesn't want you. He felt his chest tighten at the truth. Here are your chambers. Thank you. He cleared his throat, pushing aside his thoughts and memories that clung to him like rot. She smiled, poised in her curtsy. It was a pleasure, my prince. She sounded as if she had enjoyed herself. Daeron wasn't foolish or arrogant enough to believe so. My lady, he dipped his head to her. She lingered for a heartbeat. Lips pursed, but whatever the cause for it was, she did not say and excused herself. I don't want to play with him. Viserys Daeron warned his brother. They were in his chambers. It was their second day at the Rock. The guests for the wedding would not begin to trickle in for another few days. Lord Tywine had wanted to arrive early to help oversee the final stages of it, personally. That had left Daeron and his brother to be invited to spend the afternoon with Cersei and Tyrion. The invitation may have come from his betrothed, but he had no doubt that the idea was from either her mother or her father, or perhaps both, given the way his mother would talk about them. Just like their extended stay, this invitation, he saw right through it. He wanted to spar with Jaime or Robert, but the latter had gone to explore Lannisport, and Jaime had flashed an apologetic smile before saying he had to meet with father about boring things about marriage and duty. He went on, Lannister, Rock, and he had waved his hand, mockingly. So that had left Daeron as well as a suspiciously free Cersei. Their brothers, the perfect pretense to spend more time together. Viserys did not heed his warning. He's ugly. Enough. Daeron's voice was loud and firm. He crossed the room to reach his brother in 4 steps. Viserys looked to be nearly trembling at his anger, but that did not calm him. You will not speak that way. He gently put his hands on his arms so as their eyes could meet. He had already had this conversation with him and was disappointed that he had have it again so soon. Papa said it. Viserys' lip trembled, but his eyes were defiant. And Papa is king. He's wrong. Daeron's words shocked Viserys, who doubted they ever heard anyone say father was wrong. But we're dragons. He squirmed in his grip. His eyes were starting to dim while his lips began to quiver. I said enough. He nearly regretted his tone when Viserys winced from it, but he remained steadfast. His brother had to know how to act and that there were consequences for such poor behavior. I will not let my brother turn into him. You are a prince of House Targaryen, he told his brother. And you bring our house no glory in insulting our hosts. You bring our family no greatness by mocking a boy. There is no pride to be had in your words or actions. These are the words of a snake, not a dragon. Viserys' eyes welled with tears. I'm sorry, he said quickly. His face spasming at what he had caused. I won't do it again, he hiccuped. I'll be polite and kind. The tears streamed down his cheeks. I won't disappoint you or our family. I promise. Daeron released his grip on his brother, allowing him to scrub at his cheeks with the back of his hand. Tyrion is a good and smart boy, he went on. He deserves our respect and you will give it to him. I will. He was bobbing his head up and down. I will. Daeron regarded him, satisfied. Good. He then put a hand on his shoulder. I am sorry. He squeezed his brother's shoulder. I did what a dragon should not do. I lost my temper. Viserys frowned, confused. A dragon who loses his temper, brother, is one who will be consumed by it. He pulled him close, and was thankful his brother did not fight the embrace. Dragons are powerful, but we must also be careful. He could feel Viserys nodding into his chest. I can be powerful. Daeron smiled. You can be ferocious. He pulled away to see his brother returning his smile, bright eyes at the compliment, but you must also learn temperament. Viserys' response never came as there was a knock on the door. Sir Barristan was inside the chambers with him, and opened it to converse with who was out there. It is Lady Lannister, my prince. Daeron looked to Viserys first to see if he knew what was expected of him. His brother felt his eyes on him, and tried to stand straight, scrunching his face to try to look like a proper prince, but in that moment, he looked like a puffer fish. Daeron smiled down at him. Send her in. His betrothed looked no less lovelier today. Her golden hair hung in long curls, framing her face. She wore a hairnet studded with emeralds that seemed to wink at him in the light. The cut was only a smidge more conservative, but the dress was sleeveless. My lady, he moved to greet her, kissing her extended hand, before meeting those green eyes. My prince, she demurred. You must call me Cersei, she giggled. We are to be married. Cersei, he corrected himself, noticing her smile grew at the agreement. You may call me Daeron. There was a small petty part of him that wanted to refuse her that. Daeron, her eyes flashed. Now you care for my name, he wanted to say. You didn't cheer my name when I fought Rhaegar. In his thoughts, she moved past him to greet his brother, who was delighted at the attention. He watched the exchange and could see sincerity in her words and expressions when speaking to him. It was a kindness that she seemed to hide, he observed. Behind her beauty and her pride. Her smiles were lovelier when they were doting on Viserys. Daeron pushed those thoughts away and looked to see Tyrion did not seem to be present. Where is your brother? We are to fetch him, she answered, while remaining crouched down with his brother. He is attending his lessons with Maester Desmond. Ah, it came to him now, another arrangement, another attempt for the two of them. The lions were tiring in their pursuits. Won't he be in trouble for leaving his lessons? Viserys sounded worried. Cersei calmed him with a caress of his cheek. It will be our secret. She winked at him. Viserys smiled, before nodding enthusiastically. She then turned to him, a golden eyebrow arched in question. To Daeron's own surprise, he found a small smile forming on his lips. I promise. Satisfied, Cersei stood up. Daeron was about to offer her his arm, but it was his brother who grabbed her hand. Surprise flickered on her face, but her smile remained as she looked down at the youngest prince. May I escort you, my lady? He was still too short to offer his arm since that would require Cersei to crouch the whole way. So he clasped her hand the best he could into his smaller one. I would be delighted, she answered in a tone that made Viserys giggle. A bemused Daeron watched them leave the chambers. He then turned to Sir Barristan, who had watched the exchange in quiet amusement. My betrothal may be in trouble. Barristan chuckled, it appears so, my prince. Eddard. Casterly Rock was an impressive castle unto itself. How it stood nearly as tall as the wall, looking like a lion, or so the locals said. Ned didn't see it. Stepping inside to see how it was cleverly crafted and carved and dug, transforming from mines into a holdfast. It reminded him of his own ancestors who built Winterfell around the natural hot springs so as to keep the castle warm in even the harshest of northern winters. It was all gold. He had known the wealth of the Lannisters, but to see it so prominently on such mundane things was baffling. Candlesticks, chandeliers, frames, carvings, the list went on. The more he looked, the more gold there seemed to be. What good was gold in the face of winter? Gold cannot push away the cold. You cannot eat it when you're stuck inside your home because of the blizzards. The wrath of winter had humbled the north. To teach them what was needed to endure, and gold candlesticks were not one of them. The chambers given to him were exquisite and larger than the ones he had at Winterfell or the Eyrie. Pretty blankets, ornate chairs, and more gold. He looked around his room in dismay. All he could do was shake his head at this show of wealth. He looked down at his silver and grey finery. Ned then examined his reflection in the looking-glass, trying not to frown. Father had made sure none of his children who attended would reflect poorly on House Stark. New clothes were made, with more costlier materials having come from White Harbor and before there, across the narrow sea. A knock came to his door. "Come in." He thought it was Lyanna to complain about the dress father was making her wear. "My wolf arrives at last." Ned turned at the sound of her voice. There standing in the doorway looking radiant was the woman who he had been dreaming of since his departure from Dorne last year. His dreams paled at seeing her in the flesh. Her dark thick hair fell in lazy curls, her violet eyes were piercing, but breathtaking. Ashura, his voice felt dry. He had planned on seeking her out after he was presentable, but it seemed she had plans of her own. She slipped into his chambers, closing the door behind her. "I've missed you." Every step was enthralling to him. The material of her dress swishing like purple waves. Her eyes never leaving his or that smile on her lips. That smile, he admired. It could melt the wall. He cut the distance between them and was rewarded when her arms wrapped around him. "Oh Ned," she murmured his name in that thick accent that stirred something deep and primal within him. He held her close. He was afraid that this was one of his dreams and she would disappear like smoke, leaving him grasping at air. When he pulled back, seeing the pout of her lips and the sheen in her eyes, he kissed her. She responded with a hum, welcoming his lips to hers. It had not been their first kiss, despite Ned's attempts at honor. She would only laugh and say, the honorable thing to do would be to not make this maiden sad. "I missed you." Her sigh of pleasure only emboldening him. The warmth in his chest spreading. "I missed you too," she nipped at his ear. A growl followed that made her laugh. "My wolf," she said softly, holding him close. The importance of duty and honor began to drum louder and louder in his ears. The haze was beginning to lessen. He reluctantly pulled her away. Taking a deep breath to calm his heartbeat and to try to rein himself in while he still could. She was not surprised, but neither was she happy. "My honorable wolf," she groaned. "We are not betrothed, Ashura." They had gone over this more times than he could count. She fell onto his bed, but even the act was graceful. "We should not be punished for my brother's stupidity." He moved to sit beside her. His lips twitching with a smile. "You deserve to be treated with respect and honor, my lady." He reached for one of her hands. "I will not shame you." She looked at him. "How is a northerner more chivalrous than all the knights in the south?" She put her hand to his cheek. Her smile was soft, but the disappointment had ebbed from her gaze. He kissed her hand. "I will write to him again," he promised. "And when he says no?" There was a tremor to her tone that made his stomach clench. He sighed. He ran a hand through her hair that fanned around her like a dark halo. "I suppose if he says no." He saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. "Then I'll have to steal you." He then grabbed her suddenly, causing her to yelp before she burst into giggling at his tickling. "Ned!" she exclaimed. In between her laughter, she tried to push his hands away half-heartedly. He did not stop until she was red in the face and nearly out of breath. Satisfied, he moved to lie down beside her. He could hear her breath was haggard as she tried to regain her composure. "That was not honorable." Ned laughed. "My apologies, my lady." Feeling her body move closer to him, he welcomed her by wrapping his arm around her while she nestled her head onto his chest. "We should not stay like this," he warned. "You probably alerted the guards." "Good." She sounded smug. "You were trying to steal me." He smiled. "It's a Wilderling tradition." "What is?" "Stealing your wife." He remembered the stories old Nan would tell about it when he was younger. "Truly?" "Yes, it is expected for men to steal their wives from another home or clan. That doesn't sound very fair. Well, the women are supposed to put up a fight every step of the way, he replied. That's how he proves he's worthy of being her husband. Still her voice was a mixture of confusion and amusement. You Northerners are a strange people. There is one more thing. Oh? She asked, do I even want to know this tradition? He chuckled at her tone. Yes, I think you would. It is said that a true man should steal his wife very far from his home. He could feel her shifting. His words were not lost on her. It's how you strengthen your family. He looked to see her mesmerizing violet eyes were looking up at him from where her head was lying on his chest. He cupped her cheek, so a Dornish maiden would make the Starks of Winterfell stronger than we've ever been. He had been surprised to be woken by a servant the next morning, informing him that his presence was requested for breaking fast. Ned had sent him on his way, grumpy and groggy. He got dressed the best he could while trying to shake off the shackles of slumber. When he finished, a guard was waiting outside his chambers to lead him. They had not gotten very far when Lyanna appeared. Her annoyance etched in her features. Ned suspected the reason for it was the dress that she was currently wearing. He remembered how she had railed to father back at Winterfell before their departure about the number of dresses she had to bring and was expected to wear. Father did not balk. You are a Stark, Lyanna, he said firmly. You will dress accordingly, and if I hear differently then when you return to Winterfell, certain privileges will be re-examined. They walked in silence, led by the Lannister guard, who served as their guide. Ned wanted to put his sister at ease, but he knew any comments bestowed upon her from him would be met with a frown and a glare. She would see insults even behind the kindest compliments. She'd bristle before she'd blush. A few more steps and the doors awaited them. Servants in Lannister livery were quick to bow and open the doors to let them enter. Into the lion's den he heard her murmur, and he squeezed her hand before they stepped inside. The room was like every other at Casterly Rock that he's seen. Large with ornate furniture, gold coloring, and Lannister lions. The windows were golden framed, red curtains pulled back to allow the sun to shine through, lighting the room. Some of them were open to allow the cool breeze from the sea to dispel any heat that tallied too long. Waiting for them was Princess Elia Martell, the future lady of Casterly Rock, but today she was still a Martell. She was dressed in her family's colors. It was a splash of orange and red silks and laces. She had moved to greet them. Ned, it is good to see you. You as well, Princess. He kissed her cheek when they embraced. We are honored to be here and we are happy for you. As are we, she smiled, before her gaze turned to Lyanna, who stood awkwardly between them, worrying on her lip. And this must be your sister, Lady Lyanna. She is. Lyanna, this is Princess Elia Martell. He then watched his sister execute a stiff curtsy. Well met, Princess Elia. Elia welcomed her warmly and embraced like they were sisters. Ned has talked about you. Lyanna seemed caught off guard by the princess, but some of her confidence was beginning to show. She turned back to Ned with a small smirk that reminded Ned of past mischief. Has he? Yes, he has. Elia took Lyanna's hands in hers and guided his sister over to the table where a spread of food and drink awaited them to break their fast. I must say, if even half of what he says is true, then you must come to Dorne. She let her sit down first before Elia joined beside her. We do not shy away from certain prejudices the Northern Kingdoms embrace. Lyanna's brow furrowed. The Northern Kingdoms? Yes, Elia said simply. You're all Northern to us, she explained with a smile. Lyanna returned the smile, but suspicion lingered in her grey eyes. If Elia noticed it, she did not say. Pushing on in the conversation with her disarming kindness. She was asking his sister about her dress. Lyanna's answers were more bold than Ned would have liked, but Elia took no insult from them, only responding with a laugh or a joke of her own, encouraging her to continue. He was only half listening as he put some of the eggs and bacon, bread too, onto his plate. He poured himself some of the wine that was at the table already. Princess Agard's head poked through the opening. They are here. Thank you. Elia then turned to them. We will not be breaking fast alone. Ned. The Lord of Storm's End made his presence heard before he was seen. He had barely gotten out of his seat before Robert greeted him by nearly picking Ned off the floor. He patted him forcibly on the back, before he was kind enough to put Ned back down. Sorry, he looked sheepish after seeing Ned's face. Ned just laughed, before turning to see Jamie and Prince Daeron with their own smiles, as they were the next to greet him. Clasping arms, and exchanging greetings, he then looked over to see his sister and the princess had stopped talking and were watching them. Lionel Ned looked at her expectantly. She smiled, but he knew it was forced. She was resigned, but she got to her feet. Lionel, these are my friends, Prince Daeron and Jaime Lannister. Well met. Daeron inclined his head to her. Jaime echoed the sentiment. Lionel murmured her own words before retreating back to her seat, relieved. Prince Daeron took his seat across from Ned, while Jaime took the empty seat beside his betrothed, who he greeted with a smile and a kiss. I was afraid I'd have to rouse you from your sleep, she teased. I can go back to bed. He winked, and you can try. Laughter rippled across the table. Elia rolled her eyes, but was smiling. Soon, she promised, her eyes sparkling. Jaime's mirth was replaced with yearning at his betrothed's temptation. A certain glaze could be seen in his eyes. Elia giggled before she turned to Lionel, who looked equally amused. And they say women are the weak ones. Lionel's smile turned to laughter at the princess's jest. Pleased that his sister was finding her footing within the circle of Ned's closest friends. He returned to his meal, savoring the crunch of the bacon, before moving forward to his eggs. We are to go riding this afternoon, Robert said, spreading honey onto his bread. My cousin will do anything to be free from his betrothed. He laughed when said cousin. Prince Daeron frowned at him from where he sat. Ned had heard of his friend's betrothal. It had been news that seemed to be encouraged to spread throughout the Lannister household and castle. The Lions wanted all their guests to know of their good fortune in the matches of their heir and their eldest daughter. To Ned, all that mattered to him was his hope that with Prince Daeron betrothed, it would mean that his offer for Ashura's hand would be accepted. She remained doubtful, suspicious of what new schemes her older brother may be hatching, with her being the key. Riding. Lionel perked from where she was sitting with Princess Elia. Ned could see the excitement in his sister's eyes at the chance to ride and explore. Robert smiled down at her, but his eyes did not linger. He turned back to Prince Daeron and Ned. You are welcome to come if you like. He shrugged. I warn you, it will be a long ride. There's much to see in these parts according to our host. I can handle it. She frowned at the challenge. Robert chuckled at her boldness. Ned. Lionel's voice emphasizing his name in the same pleading manner she did when they were younger and she desperately wanted something. Brandon had not come on this trip, so the duty and responsibility of the Stark household fell on Ned. He knew what his father would say, and he knew what Brandon would do, but this was his decision. He smiled down at his sister. Very well, he acquiesced. Her delight was evident and her gratitude was quick. I shall go as well. He said over her thank yous. You were invited, Prince Daeron pointed out in a dry tone. Ned didn't get a chance to reply to his friend before the doors opened once more and more guests came into the room. Prince Oberyn walked in and accompanying him was Ashura. Look who I found on my way here, sister. A dear friend. Elia showed her brother and her friend a warm smile. And this is my newest friend, Lyanna Stark, Ned's younger sister. Oberyn got to her first. Smiling as he took her hand and pressed a kiss to the back of it. My lady, you cannot be from the north. I am, Lyanna said proudly. If I had known of such beauties hidden away under the snow, I assure you I would have visited. He winked. Lyanna withdrew her hand. Her face a mixture of confusion and surprise at the prince's bold words. Oberyn. Ned brought his friend's attention away from his sister. Ned. Oberyn did not take Ned's response as a chiding, but a greeting. He moved over and clapped him on the back. It is wonderful to see you again. He then moved to the other side of the table to take the empty spot besides Prince Daeron. It was evident that Oberyn had already seen them. His thoughts were confirmed by overhearing them making references to their trip to Lannisport the day before. All thoughts on his friend soon left him when a familiar perfume wafted over him. He was aware of what was expected of him in this setting. Even amongst close friends, he needed to tread carefully. He could not dare risk insulting House Dane, especially when he was hopeful for an approved betrothal between them. As well as the fact that Ashura's brother was standing in the room, serving as Prince Daeron's knight. So it pained him not to be able to greet her with a kiss or to embrace her. Instead, he had to settle for dipping his head in her direction. "My lady." Ashura was not offended by the rigid etiquette they needed to observe. She wore a similar veneer, but her violet eyes were glittering, and a smile slipped through her mask in seeing him. "Hello, Lord Eddard." She took the seat beside him. "It is good to see you again." "Lady Ashura," he said formally, "you as well." He ignored the chuckling from across the table, which was no doubt coming from Robert. Ned instead turned to Oberyn, whose dark eyes did not hide his amusement at the unfolding of Ned and Ashura's formal interactions. "How was Old Town, Prince Oberyn?" "The Citadel was nice. I forged a few links," he shrugged. "However, after the wedding, I am off to Essos." He then turned to Prince Daeron. "You are welcome to come. It could be just like we talked about, all those years ago. Join the Second Sons or start our own mercenary company, fight in the disputed lands, think of the adventures." Oberyn Elia chided her brother. "You know he cannot travel and stay over in Essos. The prince is betrothed." Daeron's face remained impassive at Oberyn's invitation and then Elia's scolding. His eyes more focused on the food before him than his friends, but Ned was certain he saw something in the prince's expression before the mask was in place. Oberyn waved his sister's excuses away. "He'll return, won't you, Daeron?" "It is a tempting offer," Oberyn Daeron declined, "but the Lannisters have given me a more tempting one, a wife and a castle." Elia looked down at the table at Prince Daeron. "I assure you, both of those are better for you, my prince, than my brother's company." Daeron chuckled, and he was not the only one. It went up and down the table at the princess' words. It was the prince's voice that had gotten the mirth to subside. "This is just the latest showing of your good judgment, princess." He then looked to Jaime, "but then again no one's judgment is perfect." Laughter and fellowship, Ned savored this moment, among his friends and family. And then beneath the table, he felt a hand intertwined with his, and love, he smiled. Notes. Thanks to all who took the time to comment. It was great reading them. I'm sorry I can't always reply to them, but I very much read them and appreciate them. Spectre for Hire. Chapter 20, Pivot. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. 280 AC. Cersei. What is wrong with him? She furiously paced in her chambers. She could not understand. She was doing everything right, and yet with all her labor, she had nothing to show for it. Cersei could count the smiles he gave her with one hand and still have fingers left. What is wrong with him? She couldn't help but repeat her question. She could not understand how this was going so poorly. It is not me, she was quick to defend. I've been the perfect host. I've been kind to his brother. She carefully picked what dresses to wear to try to entice him and to show him how lucky he was going to be. I show him what a beauty I am and he barely looks. Then it came to her. The only thing that could make sense in her troubles with him. The prince was a sword swallower. What else could it be? He barely looked at her. She showed him all the wonders of the female form and yet he gave her nothing. No lustful looks or teasing touches. What other reason could there be for him to not be interested in me? It all made sense. What else could explain his indifference to me? The more she thought about it, the more it just fit. It was never me. It couldn't have been me. She nearly laughed in delirious relief at figuring it out. Her reassurances were welcomed with a relieved smile as she checked her reflection in the looking glass. A beautiful woman looked back at her. The most beautiful woman looked back at her. Her dress was nothing fancy, red silk, gold laces, and of course the proud Lannister lion. She was not meeting her betrothed, so she put little thought in her attire. I am meeting my mother and the princess, and was a bit relieved that she could take a reprieve from some of those dresses she had been wearing. And it was all for naught, she reflected on the truth she figured out of her betrothed. I could have been naked and he would not have blinked or cared. She put that aside and focused on what she now had to do. Thinking over what her next move should be with the prince, she felt an unexpected thrill go through her. This is my chance to show how clever I can be. Was this how father felt when he put down the reins and Tarbex? She couldn't help but wonder, he showed he was clever and ruthless, and I am his daughter. He adapted to his rebellious bannerman, so surely I can adapt to this, Cersei reasoned. She knew she would not be the first woman to take a husband who preferred men. And they did not have my beauty and charm, and yet they were able to give their husband heirs. This was a challenge she'd gladly accept, another chance for her to show just how great she can be. Now that I know what I am dealing with, I can try a different tactic that will get his attention. I can let him know that I know. She liked that idea. I can prove to be a friend and confidant, sympathetic to his plight. The sudden knock at her door broke through her planning, but she did not frown or growl in frustration. How could she? She had just crafted a perfect plan within one morning. Her father could do no better. Yes. She called to the intruder. Cersei, it was the voice of the Dornish princess. Come in. Cersei moved to greet her. This was the woman who claimed to be the prince's friend, but she didn't even know his truth. She nearly smirked at the princess' mistake, but decided against it. She'll be family, and she tried. Princess Elia Martell was still dressed in her family's colors, but Lannister red could be clearly seen, blending in with the colors of House Martell. Princess, this is a surprise. Cersei embraced her when she was close enough. I thought we were to meet in my mother's solar. We were, but I thought it'd be better if we walked together, she suggested, her dark eyes twinkling when she added, a chance to discuss your betrothed. I would love that. Cersei smiled in return, not wanting to miss a chance to gloat that she knew something the princess didn't. It made her wonder if Jaime knew the truth about the prince. I doubt it, she dismissed after considering it quietly for a second. He's not the sharpest sword. Upon imagining her brother's reaction when he found out about his best friend, she nearly laughed. Shall we? Cersei asked, and Elia accepted with a nod and a smile, and the two went off. Walking through the family wing of Casterly Rock on their way to her mother's solar. I've heard you and the prince have spent a good amount of time together. Elia's voice was anything but innocent. I take it, things are going well between you. A waste of time, she wanted to say, now that she knew the truth of the prince. We have. She settled for that answer. The prince is not what I expected. She was amazed by her own wit and cleverness at times. A pity that so few can recognize it, lamenting the fools she was surrounded with. Oh. Elia's voice betrayed her interest while her dark eyes hid her thoughts. Yes, he is. Cersei would relish this. She realized she could not wait. She had to tell someone how she had solved it, and how quickly too. How she figured out the prince's secret when none of those around him could, including her brother and his betrothed. And now that I know the truth of him, I can prepare myself for what is to come. The truth. Elia's eyebrows knitted in confusion. What sort of truth do you speak of? Cersei wanted to roll her eyes. She decided against it, despite the temptation. Of the prince's inclinations, Cersei answered in a tone that conveyed it was as obvious as the sky being blue. Her future good sister stared blankly at Cersei's vague words. Inclination. She repeated, frowning, I do not follow. Must I spell it out? Cersei bit back her annoyance and instead offered the princess a smile before she looked around the corridor to ensure they were alone. When she figured they were, she made the reveal, the prince's preference towards men. The words had barely left Cersei's mouth before the princess' confusion crumbled into a fit of giggles. Loud and mirthful, she covered her mouth to try to stem them, as her cheeks grew rosy. Prince Daeron. She said in between her peals of laughter, you think he is a pillow biter? Yes. Cersei was frustrated at Elia's response. This is no jest. That only made the princess laugh louder. To the point, she stopped herself in mid-step to recover from this mirthful fit. Forgive me, she apologized in between the bouts. Her dark eyes were now shimmering when they met Cersei's. You are mistaken, Cersei. She composed herself, but the amusement remained in her eyes and etched across her features. The prince has no interest in men. Cersei frowned. Of course he does. He does not. Elia shook her head, her dark hair swishing back and forth at the motion. My brother laments it to this day. She spoke casually of her brother's tastes. He was most disappointed when the prince declined him and said as much. Mayhaps, he was not interested in your brother. Cersei found herself arguing. He has to be. What else could it be? There was nothing else. Elia shrugged. She did not take it as an insult for her brother. I do not think so, Circe. She declined gently. The prince has had. She stopped herself. She speaks with such confidence. Circe wanted to frown. The idea that the princess was familiar with the prince came to her suddenly. She felt something stir inside her belly at the mere thought. It is wrath for my brother. She refused to see it as anything else. She wouldn't. Circe did not need to consider it for a heartbeat more before realizing it was folly. Elia adored Jaime, she thought with pricked pride, in the same way the prince should me. I do not know much about the prince, she admitted, but she knew and saw enough to know he'd never hurt her brother. Had what? She had a sinking suspicion of what was being implied. She ignored the shifting in her chest. It is not that. That does not matter. Elia dismissed her concern with a brief smile, but what is important is that you will no longer be disappointed in the belief that your husband would not prefer your company. As if to reassure Circe, she grabbed her hands and squeezed them. It did not comfort her. It angered her. She wanted to sink her claws and roar in rage. As she was forced to confront this possibility that she had failed somehow. If the prince has had someone, Circe soured at just the thought that she could not compare to this whore who somehow found her way in the prince's bed. The prince chose someone, in a voice that sounded like father, and it is not you. The disappointment in the tone nearly made her shudder. I have not failed, father. I will not fail this family. She wanted to scream back. Circe. Elia's accented voice broke through, are you well? A look of concern fell over her tanned face. Shall I fetch the maester? No, no, Circe answered hastily, that will not be needed. She tried to sound reassuring, as well as look it. I will not look weak. I will not look confused. I am a lioness. I will not falter. The prince has been difficult with you. Elia did not try to temper her words, because he does not forget how you once were. How you once acted. Elia paused, a challenging hue in her eyes as if to try to refuse what had been said. Circe wanted to refuse. She wanted to cling stubbornly to her argument. She did not want to see. I thought that would not matter, Circe confessed in a tone that she should have despised. This is not the roar of a lion, but the meowing of a kitten. She suddenly felt tired. The strength sapped from her. All of her confidence being drained as if she was covered by dozens of leeches. A slow, painful pull of everything she was proud of being. You've failed. Your pride has doomed us. Each blow fell upon her with the force of a war hammer. No, 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 she could not disappoint them. You've shamed this family. With that she felt herself shatter like glass. She hit something hard. Circe blinked back to the present to find herself with her back to the wall, sliding down onto the floor. I cannot be wrong. She wanted to shout. It isn't my fault, father. Then suddenly a memory of her youth was pulling at her. She was a young girl swimming in the waters of the Sunset Sea. The waves were churning, and she was kicking, resisting. She had refused to get out, because she did not want to look weak like the others. She had thought being a Lannister would save her, that she could prove her strength and show she was better than all the others. The water was unrelenting. It did not care who she was. It did not matter how much she kicked or how much she fought. She gagged at the bitter taste of salt water in her mouth while her breaths became haggard. Her arms grew tired, and her legs slowed as if weighed down by lead. It is not the waters I'm drowning in, she found herself feeling the same way she did all those years ago. It is my failures. My foolish pride among others. Just as she had been cautioned that day by her mother, had she not been cautioned by Elia about this matter? She ignored them then and she ignored them now. Her reflections of her failings were interrupted by an unexpected embrace. She blinked to see that Elia had crouched down in front of her and put her arms around her. Circe did not fight it. She did not hate it. She returned it. The embraces before between us had always been more for show. I'd hug her, but I never really meant them. Now, she held tight to the woman who in a few days would be her good sister. And for one of the few times she could remember, Circe was thankful that she'd be getting her for a sister. When it ended, Circe pulled away, head dipped, afraid of what weakness shimmered in her eyes. Even still, I act like a cornered cat and not a lashing lion. If this was Dawn, you would rule and not your brother. The princess' words were unexpected. Circea hesitantly raised her head to see a small smile from Elia. Her dark eyes shone. It was not in disgust. It was not mocking. No, it was in understanding. Instead, you are in Jaime's shadow. You are forced to do things you do not want while having to watch him do everything you want and think you can do. Elia's tone was somber. You are not the Lady of the Rock, but a piece for Casterly Rock to use. Your betrothed is no different. A prince he is, but he is just as much a piece as you are. He too must struggle in his brother's shadow just as you do. It seemed so simple and obvious when said like that. Circea thought on it. And still I refused to see it. What do I say? But she already found herself knowing the answer. Elia's words hung heavy on Circea's mind. I have ripped the veil away. She had been forced to confront truths she did not want to. Now, she stood quietly, unnoticed in a small alcove. From here, she could look down onto the training yard to see her betrothed sparring with the Kingsguard knights. Circea had come here often as a girl, slipping out of her lessons with her scepter to hide here. In the shadows, she longingly watched her brother train and fight. While she cursed the womanly shackles she had been forced to wear. The sound of swords clattering pulled her from her childhood memories and back down onto the training yard where the prince was sparring against Barristan Selmy. They were using real steel, and even at this height, she saw the ruby of Dark Sister winking in the light. In the prince's hand, it looked more an extension of his arm, as he matched the knight's strikes and thrusts with parries. And then with a shout, Sir Gaunt joined the fray, attacking the prince with Sir Barristan following behind. The two knights were well coordinated in their strikes, but the prince fought them off valiantly. He's incredible, she watched in quiet awe. She knew the knights were holding back some of their skill and talent to accommodate the young prince, but she still thought it an impressive display. The last time she saw him spar it had been for Dark Sister. He had fought his brother, and she had been so enraptured by Roriger that she never really appreciated what she saw. Jaime had tried to tell her. She had dismissed it, believing Roriger would defeat him with ease. I refused to give him his due. A grunt pulled her eyes back to the yard just in time to see the prince push one of the knights into the dirt. Looking closer to see it had been Sir Gaunt, but the action prompted only an apology from the prince, who was still engaged against Sir Barristan. Sir Gawain laughed it off, before pushing himself up and throwing himself back into the fight, just in time to block the prince's strike that was aimed at Sir Barristan. It forced the prince to spin away from a cutting arc of Sir Barristan's sword. Be aware of your surroundings, Sir Barristan lectured as they fought. Do you need help? Circea turned in the direction of the yard to see her brother sauntering in. He looked to have hastily put on some makeshift practice gear that the guards wore. He held his sword loosely in one hand. It took you long enough, Daeron threw back, ducking his head from a slash from Sir Gaunt. I got lost. In your own castle. Daeron's dismay carried over the Song of Steel. Her brother's response was to laugh before he entered the fight to find himself against Sir Gaunt. Lost in Elia's chambers, Circea imagined, but found herself more amused than annoyed. Her opinion on the princess having shifted considerably these last few hours due to her continued support and counsel. Sir Arthur? Sir Barristan asked casually, as if he wasn't currently sparring with the prince with real steel. The sword in the morning had been watching from the stands with Prince Viserys. Yes, Sir Barristan. Would you care to join us? Barristan called out. An amused lilt in his voice. To teach these men the lessons of the uncertainty and unfairness of combat. Gladly, Sir Arthur chuckled. I hope my brother wins. Viserys supplied happily as two Targaryen knights stepped forward to take Sir Arthur's place at the young prince's side. Thank you, brother. Daeron replied in a half grunt, and half laugh. Circea felt her fingers twitch impatiently. She was quiet and useless watching as Sir Arthur stepped into the sparring area where his fellow knights were currently fighting Jaime and Prince Daeron. After a silent few heartbeats of consideration, the sword in the morning turned to her betrothed, who now found himself fighting two of the more famous and formidable knights in his father's Kingsguard. Prince Daeron cursed loudly. I heard that, Viserys said in a tattling tone. The laughter of the sparring yard melted away as a memory sprung up between her and the prince. With practice you could be the next Queen Visenya. Do you think my father would allow that? You think my future husband would want a warrior as a wife? She could not deny the desire she nursed for years of watching her brother fight while she had to sing or stitch. She dared not hope, afraid of the familiar, but bitter taste of disappointment if she was wrong about the man she was set to marry. Does he mean it now? She wondered, now that he was her future husband. Some of the finest warriors in my family were women. Seems foolish to forget them or worse ignore them. Prince Daeron. A booming voice pulled her out of her musings. She looked down to see more of Prince Daeron's friends had arrived. There was Prince Oberyn Martell, Eddard Stark, and the towering Lord of Storm's End, Robert Baratheon. She also spotted amidst the men, the beautiful Violet Ida Sheridan, and on the other side of Eddard Stark was his sister, Lyanna Stark, a small dark-haired girl, who was a year or two younger than him. I was about to complain you've been keeping us waiting, Robert chided through his deep chuckling. Jaime Eddard's voice sounded tired. You were supposed to get the prince. I got distracted. Forget the ride, Ned, Robert said, I want to fight. What fight? Sir Barristan asked before sharing a look with Sir Arthur, and in a blink, they moved in tandem, too fast and too skilled for the prince, who found himself disarmed and defeated. Sir Gawain followed seconds later with his own move that brought her brother onto the ground with the knight's sword tapping his chest plate. That wasn't knightly, Jaime groaned from where he landed. Battle rarely is, Jaime, Sir Gawain responded grimly. The conversations and noise that followed from the training yard was pushed aside in her mind at having heard what their plans for the afternoon were. They are going riding. She perked at this. This is my chance. At that thought, she slipped out of the alcove and made her way to her chambers, hoping to get there before the prince showed up to invite her. She grinned the entire way back at the thought that her betrothal was finally looking up. Daeron. My prince. Princess Elia. He frowned, confused at why Jaime's betrothed was in his chambers. Daeron was sweaty, dirty, and not in the mood for company. The ride had been exhausting under the sun, leaving him hot and tired, and the sparring before that had made him sore. The only thing he wanted in this moment was a few minutes of peace. And a hot bath. Neither of which he could accomplish with Elia here. The Dornish princess rose from where she had been waiting. How was your ride? It was good. He wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his arm. A pity you did not join us. He moved past her, hoping she'd take the not-so-subtle hint. She did not. Thank you for at least considering me, she called back to him. The same cannot be said of your betrothed. Daeron stopped at that. He felt his shoulders tense, but he refused to feel any form of guilt at his decision. Ever since he arrived at the Rock, the Lannisters had thrown their daughter at him. Every time, and he was tired of it. Of the smiles, the honeyed words, the lies that she hid behind her pretty face. He wanted to spend time with those he trusted and liked, and his betrothed was not one of them. I'm already betrothed to her, he wanted to say. He did not think it some terrible deed that he wanted to spend an afternoon without her. I'll be spending my whole life with her. I doubt she noticed my absence, he dismissed. I suppose she's still reeling from Rhaegar. A snort came from the Dornish princess. This afternoon she was reeling, but it had nothing to do with your brother and everything to do with your carelessness. Elia's tone gave him pause. It was sharp and very unlike her. Not inviting your betrothed. She shook her head, an incredulous look followed. Do you not see how that would reflect on her? You've shamed her in front of her family and all of her household and their guests. Shamed? He nearly scoffed. Elia did not back down. She was in tears when she came to see me. Her dark eyes were hard as onyx. She told me she overheard your plans from the training yard and she retreated to her chambers, awaiting your arrival and invitation. He winced. I did not know that. No, because you do not care. Elia gave him no sympathy. How long do you think she waited until she realized that you were not coming? When did she figure out what all the castle already knew? That you rode off with your friends including noble women, and your betrothed was not only not with you, but wasn't even given the courtesy of an invitation. She'll recover. Daeron knew his tone sounded petulant, but he did not care. As you have, Elia threw back, about this entire arrangement. I think you should leave, princess. She made no attempt to. I think you need to listen. She met his gaze without flinching. Unless you wish to get one of your knights to force the future Lady of Casterly Rock to leave. Very well, he recognized a defeat when he saw it. Does your betrothed know you're here? A faint smile came to her lips. Of course he does. There it was. He felt a slight pang inside his chest. He was happy for them, but he was also envious. Theirs was a betrothal he coveted. How they felt for another. How they talked and trusted one another. And what was I given? A bride who'd pick my brother over me every time. He pushed those thoughts aside and settled on mirth instead of bitterness. Then he cannot be mad at what I am about to do. He retreated to the privacy screen in his chambers so at the very least he could change out of his clothes. If he was to be chided he'd rather not be smelly and dirty too. He was out of sight from her. A soft chuckle could be heard. I will not tell him that his friend got undressed in front of me before our wedding day. Daeron laughed from where he stood. It was a welcome release. He could feel some of the tension slip away. My thanks, princess. I do not know who would be more jealous, my betrothed or my brother. Elia's light tone was a welcome change to the chiding one he had been greeted with. And on the matter of my brother, if he were here, he'd tell you among other things that you needed to remove your head from your ass, my prince. He knew while the screen would give him privacy that it would be a flimsy shield from the verbal bludgeoning by the Dornish princess. Is that so? It is. He did not respond right away. He slipped out of his dirty riding clothes and put on a fresh black tunic. The thin material helping to alleviate the heat he had just been feeling from his old attire. He sighed, feeling better already. So I should be happy that I'm marrying a woman who cared little for me and who pined after my brother. Women are pieces to be moved by men, Elia observed bluntly, and it seems unfair of you to be upset with her that she was placed before your brother. That was her father's choice. A choice she was in favor of. What woman does not want to be queen? You. That got a quiet chuckle from her. You are right. However, I am blessed in my betrothal. Many women are not when it comes to the men they marry. If you do not believe me, then look to your own mother. An icy drip went down his back. In his selfish petulance, he had forgotten all about his mother and her problems with father. Their conversation before he left replayed in his mind, and he wanted to wince and curse at reliving it to see how he was acting and how he was speaking. I did not want to see them. And worse, I protested such petty things to a woman who faces worse problems every night. The more he reflected on it, the sicker he felt. His sword was in hand, but he hadn't been able to concentrate on his lessons from Sabaristan. His heart wasn't in it. All he could think about was mother and how she was hurting. My prince. My mother's in pain, and it's because of father, the words burst out in a panicky hitch. Make him stop. Your knights. You have to protect her. You have to. Sabaristan did not meet his eyes. He is the king. She's the queen. He felt the tears sliding down his cheeks. You must protect her. Lord Commander Hightower stepped forward to put an end to Daeron's tantrum. Our vows are first and foremost to the king, my prince. Prince Daeron. The memory swirled away at the sound of Elia's voice. Do not worry, princess, I have not slipped away from your scolding. He tried to jest, but it fell flat. She's married to a madman, and I whine over a beautiful woman and a castle. He wants the floor to open up and swallow him whole. I refused to see anyone's problems but my own. So many others have disappointed mother, I cannot be one of them. He stepped away from the privacy screen in new and fresh attire, but thinking back on his selfish thoughts and peevish attitude, he still felt dirty. She showed me patience and gave me comfort, and I threw it back at her just so that I could gripe. The guilt worming in his heart by how he acted. You are right, princess. He admitted, and he knew what he had to do. My prince. Cersei greeted him politely, opting for his title instead of his name. Cersei. He returned the greeting with a smile. Her smile was formal, not friendly. Was there something you needed? Yes, there was. He pushed past her chilly reception towards him. I am sorry about this afternoon, my lady. He saw her body stiffen at the mention of her snub. It was wrong of me, and you deserve to be better treated, especially by your future husband. He dipped his head to her. I hope to have your forgiveness when you are ready to give it. Cersei regarded him behind jade eyes, hooded in suspicion. Her small, pretty mouth pursed together as she looked him over, quietly measuring his words and his tone, but then she nodded. You are forgiven, Daeron. Thank you, my lady. He was relieved and tried not to show his surprise at her sudden forgiveness. He remembered Jaime often complaining about how prickly and stubborn she could be and how she clung to slides with both hands and refused to let go. Has that not been you with her? He frowned at that honest barb. My prince. Her mouth turned upwards into an almost shy smile. The anger that had been lurking behind her green eyes vanished. And she paused, as if she wanted to say something else. She then bowed her head to hide the warring emotions she was secretly feeling. I am sorry as well, my lady. He was not expecting that. This was all catching him off guard. I have. She tried to find the right words. Her ensuing struggles lessened some of his natural suspicion and had him inclined to believe she was sincere. Elia had told me of her willingness to change. Should I not give her that benefit if we are to move forward? In seeing her before him, he found her more endearing than any of their conversations since arriving to the Rock. This gave him a glimpse of the woman behind the beauty and decorum, the act she had been putting up. He had seen it in parts in how she wonderfully handled Viserys and her time with Dark Sister. In those glances, he saw a woman he would not mind getting to know more. And perhaps one day calling my wife. I have been unfair to you, she finished, settling on the words. Jaime has always spoke highly of you, and I did not heed his words. She flashed him an apologetic smile. Thank you, my lady. Daeron was grateful for the effort at her surprising but welcomed apology. I have a gift for you. Oh. There was a curious lilt in her voice. Yes, he was still smiling, before he turned and gestured for Segwayne to come forward. He could see his betrothed was trying to see what it was. In a not-so-subtle move he turned to block her view. She frowned at him, but her sparkling green eyes belayed it. My prince. Segwayne's words caught the prince in his silent and unexpected admiration of his betrothed's beauty. He cleared his throat, but caught the sly look from the knight. He did not want to see how she had reacted. So instead he took the item and then turned around to present it to her. He knew he chose wisely by the instant reaction it got out of her. Cersei let out a soft gasp. Her eyes wide in surprise. In his hands he held out a sparring sword. What is this? She looked at it as if it wasn't real. She then ran her fingers along it as if to assure her it was not imagined. The sword was really there. It is yours. Mine. Her golden eyebrows furrowed together, but he saw the excitement shimmering behind those green eyes as understanding came to her expression. Yes, he confirmed. I cannot promise you that you will be the next Visenya. He hesitantly put his hands over hers which had been resting on the hilt. To his relief, she did not pull her hand away, but I can promise that as long as you wish to learn and train, you will have my blessing, my full support, and myself if needed. You mean it? Her voice as soft as a whisper. Yes, my lady, he smiled, and when your skill improves, I shall have a sword forged for you, but all great knights must first train with this. Thank you, she said breathlessly, slowly taking the sword out of his hands. Her mouth parted as her eyes took it in with a disbelieving sheen. For the sword, for the gesture, for the support, she said in a rush. A faint pink blush followed on her cheeks. You are welcome, my lady. His smile grew. You are to be my wife. So if any man is foolish enough to try to stop you when I am not here, you let them know that a dragon's displeasure is a terrible thing to behold. I will. Her green eyes flashed like wildfire. Good. He was silently pleased at how well the gift went over. He reveled in seeing the fierce lioness before him and no more of that ditzy maiden that had been too prevalent since he arrived. When can I start? She did not try to hide her eagerness. Daeron chuckled. He then stepped aside and offered her his arm. My lady, I thought you'd never ask. Notes. /N, the all-important first step for Cersei and Daeron on the long road they must take together. I'm sure there will be other times when it feels like they take one step forward, and then two backwards. Some have talked and asked about Daeron's standard and if he will have a unique one. He does, and I've already created it. No, it's not a golden dragon on a black field, that was Aegon II's standard. That's not really a king you want to draw comparisons to. Just in case it needs to be said again, Barristan and the knights were holding back on Jaime and Daeron. The two are very good and getting better, but they're not on that level quite yet. In part because they don't have that battle experience, but that should be taken care of when a certain brotherhood rears their head. Thanks for the support. Spectre for Hire. Chapter 21, Us. Notes. I'm sorry for the wait in updates, but writing is hard at times for me. That being said, getting your reviews really does help encourage me to keep trying and turn these blank pages into hopefully a satisfying chapter. So thank you for your support. I'm sorry I can't update this or my other stories as often as I want or at a pace you deserve. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 280 AC. Jaime. The September at Casterly Rock was golden and glorious. It was one of the newer editions of the rock. And by new, he meant that it had only been added thousands of years ago when the Andals married into his family's line. The names escaped him, but he did recall that Lannisters that followed, added and enriched the September to win favor with the Seven as well as to show the magnificence of the Lannisters to all who visit their seat. Expensive glass bathed the room in a rainbow of light. Jaime stood at the center of it, looking out at the rows upon rows of empty seats that would be filled tomorrow with all the nobility of the Westerlands, Dorne, and from other important houses throughout the Seven Kingdoms. The Seven stood perched in their spots, looming down and bespeckled with jewels and glittering in gold. To the pious and the poor, this would enamor them. For Jaime it meant very little. His eyes went to where the warrior stood vigil. His sword was shining in his hand, a beacon to protect those in need. His countenance determined and jaw set, armored and prepared to defend the faithful. When Jaime was a boy, he decided the only time he'd eagerly step foot inside a September was to be when he was doing his vigil the night before his knighthood. Now, here I am, he smiled, and he wasn't about to be knighted. He was about to be married. I yearn more for the title of husband, amused at the differences upon his reflections of his younger self. Tomorrow I will say different vows. In front of so many, he added as an afterthought, picturing the crowded September. His family would be the closest, and he took some comfort in that. In his mind's eye, Mother was smiling. Tyrion happily watched, not entirely understanding it all. Father. He paused. Would Father smile? Would he be proud? He thought he would, but a smile from Tywin Lannister was a hard thing to earn unless you were his wife. And Cersei, he stopped on his sister. Long ago he buried the special relationship they thought they had for each other. He had thought Cersei his world and loved her because of it, and would do anything. All she had to do was ask, and she did. Sometimes they were simple things like letting her dress up as him so she could attend his lessons or try to spar in the training yard. Other times it was something else, and for one fleeting second, he remembered the embraces they shared, and the feel of them together. He pushed the memories away. Thankfully, Mother had found them. She had stopped them. And watched them and then pushed him in the direction of Elia Martell, and Jaime never looked back. He didn't think Cersei ever forgave him for that. In her twisted view, she saw him as abandoning her for a Dornish princess, but he wasn't. She was still his sister, and he loved her, but she could be difficult when she was not given her way and did not forget slights real or imagined. And, I am not the most patient, he admitted, believing it unfair to put their fractured relationship solely on her. Tomorrow she'll be sitting beside her prince, her betrothed. She would look beautiful, he had no doubt, but she hoped she was happy. It didn't have to be for him, but for her and for the future that awaited her. He remembered Elia telling him she had plans in motion for the two, but she did not say much, claiming she'd spoil it by telling. Jaime had been frustrated, but trusted his future wife and let it pass, hoping his family realized how thankful they should be in having her be the next Lady of the Rock. After his uncles and aunts, there would be the Dornish, Princes Doran and Oberyn. The latter allowed a brief reprieve before his exile to attend his sister's wedding. However, Jaime knew his friend well enough to know, permission or not, Oberyn would not miss anything of Elia's. My other friends will be near, he thought of Robert and Ned. They're more brothers than friends, Prince Daeron too. He corrected, thankful for their presence in his life. He had no doubt that Ashura would be standing beside Ned regardless of how it would be perceived. aware that there was no promise of a betrothal between them and the pair may be unfairly parted. If anyone tried to put themselves between me and Elia, I'd carve a bloody path to reach her. Past his friends, he looked out at the rows filled with distinguished guests, strangers, toadies, loyal, or ambitious, the Dornish nobility, and his father's bannermen. One day my bannerman. The truth felt like a daunting obstacle rooted in front of him, and one he had to try to overcome. How could I follow my father? He saved our house. He rules the 7 kingdoms. The answer was swift Elia. And it made him smile because he knew it was true. My father has mother, and I will have Elia. The greatest boon I could ask for if I am to rule the rock one day. Eager are we? The sound of her warm accented voice pulled him out of his thoughts. Her timing was impeccable. He looked to see her walking towards him. A knowing smile on her lips, her dress was wickedly cut, and gave him great glimpses of her olive-colored skin. Upon her neck was resting a golden chain made of the speared son of House Martell. Very eager Jaime was having trouble keeping his eyes to her face. Elia laughed, and her hand touched his chin, a gentle tap followed. He looked down at her and smiled. You are tempting me, princess. Her dark eyes flashed. Am I? Yes, Jaime answered as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. He then leaned down and closed the distance between them in a kiss that his betrothed was very receptive to. Her taste was sweet and exotic, a headiness filled him and the soft moan that escaped her lips was enough to stir something within his chest. She hesitantly broke it. A humming sound followed while her eyes betrayed her own lustful wants. You'd kiss a betrothed woman in front of the 7. She teased, one of her hands had somehow found their way through his hair. They didn't stop me, Jaime grinned. She laughed, no, they did not. Her fingers combed through his hair before she dropped her hand but Jaime was quick to grab it, putting it between his. She did not resist and her smile grew. She then led him to the empty row where tomorrow their families would sit and watch as they married. I'm tempted to go grab the septon and marry us now. Elia smiled, impatient, are we? Very. Does the septon not answer to your father? I'll do it at sword point if I had to, he shrugged. In that moment, he did not care about the consequences that came with a secret and hastily arranged marriage or threatening a septon. Sword point. Her eyes seemed to hold the golden hue of the flickering candle lights when she met his stare. And what would all the visiting noblemen say who came all this way for a wedding? They'll congratulate us, Jaime replied, and then try to drink our cellars dry. Elia made a noise, but did not betray her thoughts on his answer. You seem to have this all planned. I've been thinking about this for a while, he answered honestly. That earned him one of her small, but warm smiles. Oh. Yes, the truth was he had wanted to marry the princess even before the betrothal was announced. He said as much to her and was rewarded with a kiss. He barely had time to appreciate the feel of her lips on his before she broke it. I am the blessed one, she then rested her head on his shoulders. Now tell me all about these plans you have for us. So he did. What is this? Sometime later, they had left the September with Jaime promising to escort his betrothed back to her chambers. He stopped in their walk at the sound of voices. He moved to the nearby balcony, allowing him to look down onto the training yard a level below them. Prince Daeron was sparring. He noticed the white-cloaked spectators of Sir Barristan and Gwaine on the outside to give the prince and his sparring partner some room. Elia had come up alongside him. He's not using real steel, Jaime found that odd. The prince never fought with blunted swords after Sir Barristan deemed him ready to train with steel. He found his eyes drifting towards the prince's sparring partner. They were wearing a helm, so he could not see their face. The sparring partner was dressed in dirty trousers and a red tunic. The clothes looked strangely familiar to him. That made him frown. Those were mine. Well done, Daeron praised, but you need to keep your guard up. It is difficult. Cersei, Jaime said in a half-strangled voice at the realization that the prince was sparring with his sister. Elia giggled beside him, which made him turn to her. He did not need to read her look to know she was aware of this development. He remembered back to her cautioning him when he pried for details about what was said to encourage the prince and Cersei. You have her fighting, Jaime whispered, wondering if he needed to go down there to put a stop to this. Not me, she said with all the innocence she could feign. He frowned. This is your doing. Mine. She was still smiling. I said no such thing about fighting and swords. You look very pleased, he accused. I am. She did not try to hide that. Shouldn't you be too? Pleased? He looked at her in dismay. Of my sister fighting? What is wrong with that? Elia asked in a tone that conveyed she was in the right and Jamie was in the wrong. Women should. He stopped in his answer, remembering he was talking to a Dornish princess who saw the roles of women a lot differently than the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. Realizing his mistake, he held up his hands to placate her. Satisfied at his change, she did not pursue his folly. I can show you. The prince's voice carried over into their conversation. Jamie turned away from Elia, who looked very pleased with herself, and back down onto the scene below. Prince Daeron moved to stand behind Cersei, and then put his hands on hers in an effort to show her how to hold the proper form. The prince then said something too low for Jamie to hear, but he did hear the responding giggle it got from his sister. Just when Jamie found his voice and was about to shout at them, Daeron stepped back and encouraged her to try again. She did, and to Jamie's continued surprise, it looked decent. What is happening? Nothing made sense. Cersei was learning to fight. The prince was helping her. They are happy, Elia pointed out, a slight lilt in her voice that perfectly carried over her feelings on what was happening. She was right and he was wrong. They are, he repeated in a dull-sounding tone. Watching the practice between them continue. But Cersei learning to use a sword. He shook his head. It didn't seem real. He didn't think his sister had the patience to truly learn the skill. It was a challenging road that looked easier when you were looking at it instead of walking on it. How do you think my father will react? Jamie had an idea, and it was not pleasant. He should be pleased that his daughter and the prince are getting along. Pleased? Jamie repeated incredulously, do you not know my father? He cares about our reputation, and his daughter is wearing trousers. My trousers, he wanted to add, wondering when his sister stole those. And she is sparring in the yard like a common guard. Jamie was not sure he could see a way where, if his father walked by to witness this, where it didn't end with him sending Cersei to her chambers immediately and a stern conversation with the prince. Elia did not seem bothered. His daughter is already betrothed to him. And if her future husband not just approves of it, she then paused and tilted her head towards the yard, but is participating in it, then what does it matter how your father will take it? This is... Jamie's voice trailed off. He was not really sure he had a word that could capture the conflicted confusion that he was feeling in this moment. I understand your need to protect your sister and your house. Elia guided his face towards her, by cupping his cheeks, as well as your father's role, but perhaps, we should not be so quick to stamp this out. You may be right. Down below, he could hear the sound of sparring swords clashing against one another, dull and blunted. It was a different tune than the songs of steel. May. Her hands dropped from his cheeks. She was giving him a certain look. Jamie did not budge. May. He was certain father would not look kindly at this. And yet, as he looked down at his sister trying to follow Daeron's instructions, he found himself hoping that his father would approve, or at the very least begrudgingly allow it to continue. He remembered how much Cersei had longed to go to his training with the Master at Arms. And it would appear her desire to pursue it had never dwindled as she got older. I can speak to father if needed, Jamie found himself saying. Seeing his friend and sister, who both looked to be enjoying themselves, solidified his shaky resolve in his decision. How many more bloody songs and prayers are there? Jamie found his patience waning. Here he was standing with the Septon, no Elia in sight. He didn't find it quite fair that he had to listen to the droning of the Septon while the bride stayed behind, shielded from this boredom. He tried his best to keep his smile as the Septon extolled the virtues of the Seven. He felt the eyes of all the assembled crowd upon him. Jamie had heard that this was the largest gathering of a wedding that the Rock had ever hosted. I cannot be seen as an impatient toddler. He tried to remind himself. I must look the heir to the Rock. A soft yawn broke through his thoughts, and he couldn't help but smile. He didn't need to glance over to know it belonged to his younger brother. He envied Tyrion, who would be forgiven with his action dismissed as that of a child. If only I could be that lucky. He thought back about his previous idea of holding the Septon at sword point, and couldn't deny how much more appealing he found it now. Jaime could cut away all this needless filling and get to what mattered. The vows, but at this moment, he settled for seeing his bride. As if the seven heard his griping, the Septon made the announcement to bring her forward. The sound of hundreds of heads turning, and bodies shifting as they all moved as one in their seats to turn to the entrance. There Jaime was given his first glimpse of his bride, the Princess Elia Martell. She was radiant in white silk. Amidst the pale cloth there was streams of orange and gold, rivers of sunlight woven into the fabric that made Elia brighter than any star. Her dress was cut with a plunging neckline. Her bronze skin only looked more tantalizing against the pale silk. Her sleeves were slit with more gold and orange woven up the seams of it. Upon her head rested a coronet fitted for a princess, intricately designed, that shone as brightly as the red Martell sun etched into the middle of it. Cut rubies were spread out around it to mimic the rays of sunlight. Her dark hair was braided and curled, falling around her, a halo of night, that framed her delicate and pretty face. Jaime was certain he looked a gaping fool, breathing in his bride's beauty. However, he could not find himself to care as she neared him. Her smile was as stunning as her golden banded necklace. Beside her, and serving as her escort in replace of her deceased father, was the Prince of Dorne, her older brother, Doran. He looked proud at his young sister when he presented her to Jaime. His dark eyes misty. He could not stop smiling as he took her hand from Prince Doran. No words were exchanged, but the message was clear between them when their eyes met. Doran gave him a small smile and a tip of his head. Her hand on his arm, they took the few steps to reach the Septon. He felt the beating of his heart against his ribs, bundled and excited. He was finally near to what he's dreamed for so long, with the woman beside him. The Septon looked between them with a friendly smile. He then turned to Jaime. "You may cloak the bride and bring her under your protection." Jaime did not need to be told twice. His fingers were deft in their unclasping of the maiden cloak of House Martell. He handed it to Prince Doran, who took it and stepped backwards, allowing the bride to move forward into her new family. The Lannister maiden cloak was given to him by his father, who stood tall and proud. Jaime did not miss the small, but noticeable smile on his father's face when he accepted the cloak, or the look in his eyes. This was the cloak father used on mother. It looked worn, since this was the cloak that many Lannisters before them wore. The fabric was smooth and rich, a deeply colored red. The golden lion stood regal, roaring its defiance. Jewels and other fine materials were sewn in, but Jaime did not care to study it. He turned and moved to cloak his bride. When he was finished, he couldn't help but marvel at the sight of her finally in his family's colors. "No, now they are our colors. My lords, my ladies," the Septon's voice pulled his eyes from his bride. "We stand here in the sight of gods and men to witness the union of man and wife. One flesh, one heart, one soul, now and forever." Jaime was not sure he heard a more perfect line in his life. He took Elia's hand, their eyes meeting as they stood side by side in front of the Septon, who proceeded to tie the ribbon around their joined hands. "Let it be known that Elia Martell and Jaime Lannister are one heart, one flesh, one soul. Cursed be he who seek to tear them asunder." The tying of the knot was done. "In the sight of the seven, I hereby seal these two souls, binding them as one for eternity." The Septon then unraveled the ribbon that had joined their hands. "Look upon each other and say the words," the Septon instructed them. In one voice, he and Elia recited their vows: "Father, smith; mother, maiden; crone, stranger. I am hers and she is mine," Jaime declared. "From this day, until the end of my days. I am his and he is mine." Elia promised. "From this day, until the end of my days. With this kiss, I pledge my love," Jaime announced, and turned to his wife and kissed her amidst the applause of friends, family, bannermen, and nobility. But in that heartbeat of bliss as their lips touched, the only thing in the world was him and her husband and wife. "Joanna. This is our legacy." She looked out from her seat in the golden hall. Spread out before her the revelry and the pageantry that came with bringing two of the great houses of Westeros together. Every table was filled, music was playing, food and drink was being served, as all the guests took in the might of the new marriage between Lannister and Martell, a union of the Westerlands and Dorne. One she did not waste any time respecting, making sure courses were served to their guests with food, wine from both the Westerlands and Dorne. She would not treat their new allies as strangers, but wanted to welcome them into the Rock and show the Lion embraces their friends. She expected some to sneer at the Dornish courses, old hatreds run deep, some prejudices were not cleansed so swiftly, but that did not concern her. They'll get used to it, and they'll eat it. She knew they would. The sheep always do. On the walls or hanging from the rafters were the banners of the houses who were attending the wedding. The most prominent one was neither the Dornish sun or the Lannister lion. It was the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen. The two Targaryen princes in attendance were sitting at a table to her left along with her children, Cersei and Tyrion. At that table, her youngest son, Tyrion, was sitting between Prince Daeron and Cersei. His mismatched eyes taking in the grandeur of the feast before him with unmasked awe. His face moving this way and that, trying to capture everything that was happening around him. A wide smile split his face. Without Cersei's coaxing, Joanna was certain her boy wouldn't even be eating. He seemed more intent on seeing it all in front of him instead of the food on his plate. Other banners stood out that showed the growing influence of her family, and the friendships her heir was wise to make. There was the crowned stag of House Baratheon, the Lord of Storm's End. The grey direwolf of House Stark, the Wardens of the North. They rarely ventured south of their borders, unwilling to play at southern politics. Not unwilling, she corrected, unable. They were just too stubborn to admit it. However, the Lord of Winterfell, Rickard Stark, was surprising her. It seemed he was capable of playing the game and his moves were intriguing her. He betrothed his heir to Lord Hoster's prized eldest daughter, while his second son was seeking to court a Dornish maiden. "What are you up to, Rickard?" She had met the man a few times, gruff and stern, but shrewd. She could see he had plans of his own, she just could not see where they led. For a reclusive family, she thought, they were suddenly very willing to spread themselves in the south. It was not just Lord Stark who was making plans, Lord Hoster was currently fostering the heir to the Vale. It would not surprise her if the Lord of Riverrun was trying to secure a match between his second daughter, Lysa Tully, and the heir, Daenerys Arryn. If that were to happen, suddenly they'd find a very strong and tightly woven coalition between the North, Riverlands, and Vale. She did not like the possibility of an alliance so close to her borders without any Lannister influence. She knew Lord Arryn looked at Robert and Eddard as sons to him, but he was old and if he passed, there was nothing of those bonds to hold them together. It was the Riverlands, she knew, that her family had to address. Lord Tully's heir was a growing young man, younger than her Jaime. Perhaps she could get Edmure Tully to serve as a page or squire to Jaime, or the Prince Daeron or one of their friends. A chance to form a bond to ensure the Lion wasn't forgotten. It was a matter that she would keep her eyes on. While she was curious about the Starks' strange new southern interests, she was not worried. Rickard's second son, Eddard, was one of Jaime's closest friends, joining Prince Daeron and Lord Robert Baratheon. She could not help but compare them to Tywin, Aerys, and Steffon when they were younger. They were inseparable, loyal, and ambitious. All having plans to succeed their fathers and wanting to put their own marks onto the Seven Kingdoms. Sadly, the friendships have frayed, Steffon's tragic and untimely death, and Aerys turning into a cruel shadow of the once charming and promising heir. May my son and his friends never feel that same tragedy of a dying friendship, she prayed, knowing how much they valued and respected one another. May theirs only grow stronger in the coming years. Looking on at other banners, to her, it was not the ones that were on display to show who had come to the wedding, but those not seen that were the most satisfying to her. Amidst their bannermen, two were noticeably absent. The Red Lion of House Rain and the Seven-Pointed Star of House Tarbeck. Joanna would never forget the audacity of Lady Ellen Tarbeck. She remembered when she found out that when Lady Tarbeck had captured her brother, Stafford. The rage she felt at the gall this bannerman had at not just taking a Lannister, but making threats and demands. It was outrageous, and she had been furious. Thankfully, where Tytos saw a mistake, and was quick to forgive for a fake smile and a few honeyed words, Tywin saw the need for retribution. It was her Tywin who would teach them a very valuable lesson in what happens when one incurs the wrath of the real lion. Why should I pity houses that threatened mine? Why should I weep for bannermen who would see the Lannister lion leashed? She smiled at the annihilation of her family's rivals. They wanted us low and weak. To cast us out and rule in our stead. They got what they deserved. Her conviction would never waver on that. And here my family is. She looked around at the position her husband worked so tirelessly to restore in their family's reputation and prestige. He pulled our name out of the mud so it could shine once more. My son is married to a Dornish princess and my daughter will marry a Targaryen prince. She sipped her wine, unable to contain the smirk at how their revenge had only gotten sweeter. We continue to rise while they sink further into the depths of the dirt to be forgotten. Their bones and names will only be dug up now to serve as a warning of her husband's resolve and the Lannisters' wrath. You've outdone yourself, dear. She turned to see her husband was looking at her. Thank you, she touched his cheek, but what else would you expect from your wife? The golden flecks in his eyes shone in amusement. Nothing less. He put his hand atop hers and guided it back down to the table, but he made no effort of letting go. I still think Jaime should have been knighted before he was married. She had heard this all before, but humoured her husband. Joanna knew Tywin well enough to know this was hardly a quibble for the Lord of Casterly Rock and Hand of the King. Your son would never have accepted it, she pointed out. He's like his father in that regard. She said lightly, will not accept it without earning it. He responded by gently squeezing her hand, but the corners of his lips crooked upwards. How many times do you think they'll play the song? She asked wryly. Quite a few, Tywin answered, a rare display of mirth touching his tone. Shall we make a bet? On. His voice could not hide his interest. On how often it's played. He thought it over quietly for a few seconds. Very well, he sounded equally amused and intrigued. Good, Joanna was pleased. I'll allow you to pick the number. How generous of you, he replied. I will say no more than 10 times. 10. She repeated, believing it a low number. They had hired more than twice that many singers, and minstrels, and everyone that had ever come to the Rock insisted on playing the song. Claiming they could play it best, or in a way they had never heard before. They believed a few strings of a harp and a well-sung song would earn them some acclaim or gold from the Lions of the Rock. Such pitiful hopes. 10, it is. And the terms of the winning. Confident, aren't you? She teased. He turned to her with a look that she couldn't help but laugh at. Cherishing her husband's rare, but wonderful sense of humor. For a moment, I thought I was sitting next to Geryon. Tywin met her jape with a stare that was all show and no bite. You can be very vexing. She grinned, would you have me any other way? No, he leaned over and kissed her cheek. His mouth then moved to her ear, thank you. Joanna did not need him to clarify. She nodded, touched by them. I gave him no new lands. No new wealth, but he wanted me all the same. The great Tywin Lannister, and he picked me. An honor she'd never forget, and was so thankful for the man she married. I love you, Tywin, she said softly, underneath the jubilance of their wedding guests. She saw the look that passed over his face at her words, and how he smiled. And are you, Joanna? The moment between them did not linger as the duties of Lord and Lady of the Rock and hosts to this lavish ceremony pulled them in different directions to servants and guests. Tywin's brother, Kevan, came to approach him, and the two talked in hushed voices, and she was certain it was about her husband's plans for Summerhall, the future seat of Prince Daeron and their daughter, Cersei. Plans she and Tywin had already discussed, so she did not pay attention to what was said between the brothers. Instead, she looked past him where their son and new good daughter sat at their own private table at the center between the Lannister and Martell families. She watched with quiet adulation at how the newly married couple only seemed to have eyes for each other. Whispering and laughing, sharing food off each other's plates, and each other's hands, and drinking from each other their goblets. Her heart swelled at seeing her son being so happy. It did not lessen the small, but selfish ache in her chest at having her oldest, no longer being the young boy, who'd follow her around. He'd beg for her to tell her stories or to watch him train in the yard. Her son who was always so quick to hug her, and always wanted to make her smile and happy. My boy, she reflected on the wonderful memories of his youth, but she accepted who he was now, a man and a husband. And I couldn't be prouder. It wasn't until some time later into the feast and evening when the din of their guests' celebrations had died down. The minstrels were still happily playing, the queen took off sandal, the king took off his crown. In the aftermath of her son and bride being carried away and stripped by the rowdy, lusty, and the drunken for their bedding. That was when her husband leaned over towards her. They've stopped playing the song. She did not try to look innocent when she met her husband's stare. Of course they have. Joanna wasn't going to say what bribes or orders or threats were made to ensure the reigns of Castemaria would stop being sung and played at just the right amount needed for her to win. Instead she asked him. Did you really expect me to lose? Tywine smiled. No, I did not. Notes. Forgive my handling of the wedding and the romance, these are not my strong suits. If anyone is curious, I did a mixture of books and shows for it, with a dash of liberties being taken. One of the pitfalls of aging up characters is that some of their notable achievements are not as impressive. In the books, Jaime was 15 when he was knighted for his work against the Brotherhood. Here he is older and those events haven't happened yet, but his prowess and skill is still the same. We will get more of the feast in the next chapter. I just wanted to close this chapter with that scene between Joanna and Tywine. Hope that was okay. If you have time, would you consider leaving a review? It would make my day. Thanks. Until next time. Spectre for Hire. Chapter 22, Judge. Notes. Thanks for the great support from the last chapter. It was wonderful to read your comments and I was pleased to see so many enjoying what they were reading. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 280 AC. Lyanna. The golden hole was large and loud. And so much gold, she looked up to see it twinkling from the oddest places. She was half surprised to find the plates and goblets on their tables were not made of gold. She sat at a table of honor, or she had been told it was, by one of the Lannister servants who ushered them here. She was aware that when she was admiring the whole others were admiring her. Lyanna could feel their gazes on her and her dress. Remember this, she thought scornfully, I will not be wearing another one anytime soon. She turned her attention away from those guests and back to those at their table. They were seated at one of the smaller tables in the hall. She wasn't sure if that was an honor or a slight. Across from her sat her brother's closest friend, Robert Baratheon, the Lord of Storm's End. He was tall and large even when sitting down. When standing he was well over 6 feet. His hair was black and long and his blue eyes shone bright. His face was clean-shaven. He was quick to smile and eager to laugh. She had met him once before this trip when Robert visited Winterfell last year with her brother. Lyanna hadn't paid him much attention as she was more excited at having Ned back from the Vale. She had wanted to spend time with him and not this Stormlord, who was a stranger to her. Lyanna did remember one thing about the man during that visit. He had gotten some girl in the Vale pregnant and had received the news from Lord Jon Arryn while he was there with them. She hadn't been surprised. Ned had mentioned in a letter that Robert could be like Brandon at times. A gentle way of describing his friend's nature. Though Robert had shown little interest in the servants of Winterfell or the whores in Wintertown during his stay with her family. Mayhaps the child tempered him, she suspected, but there was little confidence in that judgment. Can a man change his nature? Are you not enjoying the peppers, Lyanna? She looked up to the woman who was sitting on Robert's other side. A woman who she had only heard in passing. Whether it was a brief mention in one or two of her brother's letters or in overhearing a conversation Ned had with Robert when they were in Winterfell. The beautiful maiden of Starfall, Ashara Dayne. I am not, Lyanna answered bluntly. From the corner of her eyes, she saw her brother didn't seem keen on her truth-telling, but she paid him no heed. Ashara did not take offense to her answer. She smiled, they are not for everyone. Agreed. Lyanna pushed the remaining peppers on her plate with her fork to the side. This course was too hot and spicy to her liking. She had liked some of the tart fruits that had been served earlier, but not this offering. Ashara Dayne is my brother's worst-kept secret, Lyanna thought with some amusement. He sat across from her, and his attempts to look indifferent or non-suspicious when he was around the Dornish beauty wouldn't fool a blind man. Not all Starks have that Dornish appetite, Ned. Robert grinned wolfishly. Her brother frowned, before dipping his head while muttering something. Ashara took the jest with a smile before swatting the Stormlord who sat beside her. Robert took it in stride, forgive me, my lady, but he was laughing all the same. However, I do have good news that perhaps will put me back in your favor. Ashura arched an eyebrow towards him. Do tell. It's done, Ned. Robert nearly roared out the answer, unable to contain the delightful fervor that spread across his face. What are you? Robert was too excited. He interrupted her brother before he could finish his question. Land, Ned. Robert answered. It's done, I've got land for you in the Stormlands. What? Ned gaped at his friend. Truly? Ashura was equally surprised. Lyanna felt something cold coil in her chest at this reveal. She had always thought her brother would return home, return north once he was done fostering in the south. She never thought he'd stay south. I got the letter from Storm's End, from my maester. He waved his hand. Cresson, I think. His smile dimmed, when trying to recall it, but it brightened once more. It's done, letters have been written, favors made, agreements given, he went on. This wasn't a tone of boasting, but one of droning, who sounded bored by all the endeavors that had been undertaken for this to happen. It doesn't matter, he finished at a part where there was clearly more that could have been said. You'll have your own keep, and you'll be a lord. He then held out his thumb and forefinger, a small lord, but an important lord, all the same. He laughed. Robert. Her brother was still trying to comprehend what his best friend was saying. It's taken care of, Ned, all of it. Robert was still smiling, like his name day came early, but it was him who was giving the gifts, and her brother the one receiving them. And this was a generous gift to be given. It's all being written up at Storm's End, thank the gods for Maestas, he finished. I can't recall the spot on hand, but it shouldn't be too far from Storm's End, and if it is, well, I'll just give you the land in between so you'll be closer, he japed. Robert, Ned's grey eyes reflecting his dismay. I don't know what to say. This is a great gift. Robert. Ashura was just as taken aback by the Lord of Storm's End gesture. Robert took their reactions without pride, but with eyes flickering with hope. You told me, Ned, he said slowly, that he paused before looking first to Lyanna, but then Ashura, but her brother nodded, and that seemed to give Robert permission to continue. You said Lord Dane didn't think a northern match was either feasible or profitable to his family's interest. He did, Lady Ashura said in a tone that was sharper than her family's famous sword. Her pursed lips showing her thoughts on her brother's judgment on the matter. So what if your holdings were in the Stormlands? Robert went on. We talked about it before. We did, Ned agreed, but his tone was difficult to gauge. But that was just talk, Robert. He was looking at his friend in quiet astonishment. Well, I talked too. Robert didn't seem to notice his friend's reaction. To Lord Arryn and others, and it was possible with some help from our generous hosts. He gestured with his head to the Lannister table where Lord Tywin Lannister sat quiet and imposing beside his beautiful wife, the Lady of the Rock. Lyanna looked between her brother and his best friend. She felt an invisible string tug at her heart, a selfish pull, at understanding what this could possibly mean. I'm going to lose him to the south permanently. Lyanna looked down to see she had mushed one of her Dornish peppers with her fork at the idea of it. She found her throat suddenly dry and helped herself to some of the wine that had been given to them. The taste was sweet with a little tartness, but she didn't complain. She drained half her glass while looking over the brim to the others at her table. Robert, this is wonderful. Robert stood taller than most men, but the thought of being close to her brother made him as giddy as a boy. She put her glass down, and could not help but find the tray endearing at seeing his genuine love for her brother. To her chagrin it made her a little less annoyed towards him. What of father? She asked suddenly, unsure if it was the fear of losing Ned that made her puncture the mood at the table or the wine. The latter was something she was rarely allowed to drink, and usually only a cup, and that was during special feasts. Father. Ned blinked as if just remembering him. He turned to her, but she did not see disappointment or annoyance in his expression when their eyes met. He then flickered towards Ashura, but hesitated before answering. In that, she thought, he was going to say something that the Dornish beauty did not know. Will not object, Lyanna. What? She then realized her brother's hesitation had nothing to do with Ashura, but with her. What are you saying? Ned's lips pressed together. That father is grateful for the friendships I've made in the south, and that he would not object to the possibility of me staying here if it could be arranged. He paused. In a manner that would respect our family's standing and equal to what I could have gotten in the north as a second son. Ned Robert broke through the siblings' conversation, "You sly wolf." He was chuckling, clearly impressed at his friend, and equally oblivious to the awkwardness that was hanging between brother and sister. She should not have been surprised by father's decision. Lionel knew father was pleased and impressed with her brother's friendships with Robert, Jaime, and Prince Daeron. One was the Lord of Storm's End, one would be the next Lord of Casterly Rock, and the last was a Targaryen prince who would be named the Prince of Summerhall. Why would father risk jeopardizing those friendships by keeping her brother in the north? A cold voice whispered inside her. In the south they could be further cultivated and strengthened. Lionel understood it all. Father would approve if Ned was given a seat in the south, a holdfast similar to the small one he would have received in the north as Brandon's bannerman. When were you going to tell me? Lionel's mouth twisted. Her question came out more as a hiss than a whisper. It did the part of quieting Robert's celebration. There was a small, selfish part of her that took satisfaction at quelling the Storm Lord's elation. He sighed. It was not likely, Lionel. A flash of something flickered over his face when he closed his eyes. I did not think. Lady Ashura ignored decorum to reach a hand across the table to squeeze her brother's. His change was immediate, raising his head and sending her a small, but thankful smile which she returned. Robert said uncomfortably, I did not mean offense, my lady. He bowed his head to her. You did not give it, Lord Lionel found herself replying. She would not fault Robert for trying to help her brother. If anyone was to apologize it should have been her, regretting her selfishness at how she reacted to news her brother clearly welcomed if it meant he could be with the Lady Ashura. I am happy for you, brother. She forced herself to smile, hoping it did not look like a grimace, but it evidently did not, since her brother returned it and wrapped an arm around her and pulled her into him. You can visit, you know, Lia, he murmured from where his head was resting atop hers. Perhaps, she offered in an uninterested tone, before hugging her brother fiercely, but only if you write and beg me to. I will. I'll even add teardrops to the letter, he replied dryly. Lionel snorted, very well. He then kissed the top of her head before turning his attention to the woman across from him. Ashura. His voice uncertain, what would your brother say to it? She did not answer right away, looking to be thinking it over. I think, she began, I think he would approve, flashing Ned a bright smile. He complained before that a castle in the north would be pointless and offer little due to the great divide between our lands, her mouth betraying her thoughts on her brother's opinion, but a castle in the Stormlands, her violet eyes glimmered, he'd be a big adult to refuse. I will write the letters tonight, Ned decided, smiling widely. You are a Stark, Ashura reminded him. An old and powerful name that should not be denied or ignored wherever you end up. She squeezed his hand which she was still holding. Do not confuse my brother's foolishness, Ned, for your unworthiness. Of course not, Robert thundered, puncturing the mood between his friend and the Lady Ashura. He sounded insulted on Ned's behalf. His tankard hitting the table. I'll write to him too, Ned. He saw that her brother was going to protest, so he pushed forward. No need to thank me, Ned. Ned's lips crooked upwards and his grey eyes could not hide his amusement for his friend. I would never, Robert. That got a laugh out of the Lord of Storm's End. A toast, my friend. He insisted, on the possibility of the Starks of the Stormlands, he proposed. Ned chuckled, raising his tankard and meeting his friends. I could drink to that, Robert. Lionel and Ashura followed and their glasses met and the four friends drank to the possibility. She found the wine's tartness had lessened upon seeing how truly happy this news made her brother. I am happy for him, Lionel could not deny that, but it still hurt at thinking of losing him to the south for good. She had cried when father had told her that Ned was given the honor of going to the Vale to foster with Lord Arryn. Lionel had hated father for it, not understanding why he was separating them. Mother had always said, the wolves are strongest together, so why would father send one of them so far away? What's all this? Prince Daeron Targaryen was standing behind Robert. He was smiling when he took in the sight of his friends before him. It's for Ned, cousin, Robert answered. He may become a lord in the Stormlands. Truly. The Targaryen prince turned to Ned for confirmation, who offered it with a slight nod. The prince wasn't smiling. My condolences, Ned. I hear the Lord Paramount of the Stormlands is a real ass. He clapped Robert on the back while he laughed. He was not alone in his jape. Lionel found herself laughing, as did her brother and Ashura. Robert too took his cousin's jest with a laugh that nearly drowned out all theirs. "Careful, cousin, I'll be your liege lord too." He wagged a finger at him. Prince Daeron held up a hand in peace. "No need to remind me of my good fortune." His lilac-colored eyes then fell on her. "Lady Lionel." He inclined his head towards her. "Prince Daeron," she replied dutifully, not needing her brother's warning look to know she needed to behave, especially around a guest as important as a Targaryen prince. She still found it odd that Ned had befriended a prince. Lionel had read and heard of the fabled looks of House Targaryen, but it was still a different feeling to actually look at one of them. There was an ethereal quality in his appearance that could not be captured in pages or stories. Silvery hair and lilac eyes sounded silly or strange, but in seeing him, she thought it made him anything but. He was handsomely dressed in black and red silks. A ruby three-headed dragon brooch pinned to his tunic, while a single dragon head made in silver kept his cloak in place, said cloak the same color as a maiden's blush. The blood of the dragon. She remembered Maester Waller's teachings on the royal family. "Where is Prince Viserys?" Ashura inquired. The prince's smile was easy and friendly. He plucked up the courage to ask Princess Arianne Martell to a dance. He turned his head to where the young prince and princess could be seen dancing. When he turned back to face them, he was no longer smiling. "I have actually come to check on you, my lady." "Me?" Ashura asked, surprised. My lady." He confirmed gravely, "I've come to see if you've recovered." "Recovered?" she repeated. "Yes, surely you're still reeling at the tragedy that we are not to be betrothed." His lilac eyes sparkling with mirth, flashing her a grin. She responded over the guffaws of Robert. Lionel smiled, and it turned into a laugh when she saw how her brother was reacting to the jape. "I did recover, my prince," she said sweetly. "T was a heartbeat of regret, which has been followed by endless jubilee." The prince chuckled before taking a seat on his cousin's other side. Even in the north, King Aerys and his troubles were well known. She knew in the beginning father was cautious of having Ned close to one of Aerys' sons since the king's behavior the past few years was unpredictable. Maester Wallers had assured her father that such caution wasn't needed, and a Stark close to a Targaryen should be welcomed and not questioned. Father relented to the Maester's counsel. "He does not look or act volatile or mad like his father," observing the prince who was speaking to Robert and Ned about something. While it was said his father was spiteful and cruel, Prince Daeron was friendly and charming in her limited interactions with the Targaryen prince. She even heard Princess Elia speaking to Ashura that the prince had allowed his betrothed to train with a sword. Not just allow but helped her. Lionel could not help but be envious of that. She knew the prince was a good swordsman. He won the fabled Valyrian steel sword Dark Sister in a duel against his older brother, the Crown Prince Rhaegar. Lionel would not forget the letter her brother had sent them back at Winterfell, recalling the sparring spectacle between Targaryen princes. Cersei Lannister is a lucky woman, she thought, to have a betrothed and then husband, unbothered if their wife learned sword skill and even to encourage such a practice. Father allowed her certain freedoms, but she was not foolish enough to think such practices would last forever. Especially now that she had flowered and letters were beginning to come more frequently to Winterfell, pursuing the chance of a possible marriage with her. "They write to my father, but it's my hand they want." She didn't think that was fair. "It's his voice I must adhere even if it's my life." She frowned down into her empty goblet, remembering some tried to console her by saying, that was the way of things. Lionel had scoffed at that answer. "Why should I follow the same path just because those before me were too stupid to question such things?" "Lady Lionel." She blinked up to see the others at the table were looking at her. "Yes." She didn't know who to address since she was unsure who had called her name, but she smiled in the polite insipid way she saw other ladies do when they were befuddled or surprised. It was Prince Daeron who replied to her. "We were wondering if you'd be interested in another ride tomorrow." She instantly perked up at the invitation. There were so many surrounding hills and plains to explore. She found all the green that encompassed the land much more beautiful than all the gold that was hoarded within the castle. Not to mention the chance to spend more time atop a horse instead of in a dress. "Yes, I would love to." She then turned to her brother, "if Ned allows it." She made sure not to make a face at that word. Lyanna hadn't thought it fair that her brother was her keeper on this trip, but father had made it very clear. Ned smiled, as if reading her thoughts on the matter. Of course. Thank you, she said dutifully, but it was sincerely meant. Will you be carrying Dark Sister with you, Prince Daeron? Lyanna had been sorely disappointed that he hadn't brought it with them on the previous ride. Will I need it? He asked, amused not by her, but the unexpected question. I hope not, but I'd like to see it, she admitted honestly. It's a very famous sword. She left out the part where it was believed to be made for a woman and not a man given its shape and build. Then you may see it, my lady. He said kindly. And if most of Ned's stories about you are true, I'll let you try it too. Thank you. Lyanna was unable to keep the eagerness out of her tone or expression at his answer. She had only seen ice before in regards to Valyrian steel swords, and father wouldn't let her hold it. He barely let her touch it, the few times given the chance. Prince Daeron took her reaction with a growing smile, inclining his head to her. You are welcome, my lady. The Lady Cersei is very fortunate to have you as her betrothed, my prince. She meant every word of it. I shall inform her of that blessing the next chance I get, Prince Daeron replied, but you should know that I am not alone in the sentiment. He tapped his cousin's arm. Robert believes it as strongly as I do. That surprised her. Really? She turned to the Lord of Storm's End, who looked caught off guard at the sudden turn of attention towards him by his cousin and her. It is, my lady. He cleared his throat. I'm letting my daughter, Maya, stay at the Water Gardens as Prince Doran's guest. With permission given that when she is older she be allowed to participate in any martial training if her heart desires it. His blue eyes shined for the girl. The truth is I shouldn't be praised for it, he admitted. Silks, songs, laces, and music, I do not know those things. He shrugged helplessly, but swords and steel. That I do know, so why not let my daughter and I share something together? We need to find a Dornish maid for you, Robert Asherah offered. Perhaps, but the two best are already spoken for, he replied. They are. Ned was quick to agree. It earned him a lovely smile from the Maiden of Starfall. I would like a wife and daughter who I can know and understand. Robert turned back to Lyanna, someone to ride with, to hunt with, even spar. So you see, my lady, I do it for my own selfishness. My cousin, ever so modest, Prince Daeron praised, though, it would be a sight to see your daughter try to wield that bloody hammers of yours, he japed, getting a smile out of his cousin, which then turned into a rumbling chuckle. It's not that heavy, cousin. Robert nudged the prince with his shoulder. An informal act that she had seen between her own brothers more times than she could count. Well, it's not as heavy as you. Careful. Robert's voice was all mirth and no malice. Your precious white cloaks are too far to intervene before I can shove you off this bench, my prince. Lyanna was laughing along with her brother and his friends at the entertaining argument unfolding between the Lord of Storm's End and the future Prince of Summerhall. She saw the glittering amusement in Robert's blue eyes, that and his infectious smile only highlighted the Lord's handsome face. His booming laugh had a way of bringing all those around him into the same cheery disposition that he so easily carried. Speaking of wives, where is your betrothed, my prince? Lady Asherah asked once the laughter had subsided. She is cross with me at the moment. How did you botch this already, cousin? We had an argument, he answered plainly. Over? Lady Asherah asked. The prince's new smile was all show. I will not divulge, my lady. His tone was measured, that is, unless you acquiesce to a dance. Asherah's violet eyes looked him over in silence before she accepted with a soft dip in her head. Very well, my prince. She stood gracefully from her seat. Oh, stop, scowling Ned. He didn't even need to look over at his friend to see it. Will you do your prince a favor and dance with my betrothed? Ned did not hide his surprise at the request. Me? His eyes betraying with a quick glance who he really wanted to dance with. Yes, soothe her over, he said it as if it was a simple task to do, and I shall be rewarded for your endeavors. A sly look passed over the prince's face at his next words. That'll allow me to relieve you and dance with her while you'll have to take my place. Lyanna did not miss the flash of understanding that flickered over her brother's grey eyes. Very well, my prince. Ned stood, looking out to where the Lady Cersei Lannister was. A wolf's not afraid of a lion, Ned. Lyanna teased him. Pleased, when her brother smiled and nodded. We're not, he agreed before setting off to seek a dance with his friend's betrothed. Prince Daeron took Ashura's hand and guided her to where the dancing was. The band of minstrels were playing a tune that she did not know, but the music was lively and it earned a great cheer from some of the Westerland's bannermen, which made her think it was one of their favorites. It was only her and Robert. Their little table felt increasingly smaller with just the two of them. If the Stormlord thought the same, he did not say it, drinking from his tankard in silence. His blue eyes roaming the hall, looking for wenches and servants, she suspected, but was proven wrong. His eyes were not on any of the comely servants that moved between the tables, refilling drinks and serving the next course. They were on the Dornish table. "You're doing a good thing for your daughter," my Lord Lyanna spoke up. One of those comely ladies had come to their table to fill their cups. She was fair-haired with a coy smile, and Lyanna did not miss how she tried to catch the Stormlord's eye. Robert's reputation precedes him, she thought unkindly. The Lord of Storm's End didn't give the servant a second look after giving his gratitude for refilling their glasses. "Thank you, my lady," Robert replied politely. "If you'll excuse me," he moved to stand up, and then bowed his head to her. "I see Prince Doran unattended, and I wish to speak to him." I understand. Lyanna was surprised by this reversal and found herself missing that charming Stormlord who could make her brother smile so easily, and whose laugh was as infectious as it was loud. "Lord Robert," she called after him. He stopped and turned in her direction. "My lady." "If you insist upon being my brother's friend," she said softly, "then I suppose I'll allow you the privilege to call me Lyanna." That got him to smile, and his blue eyes shone brightly. "An honor I will treasure, Lyanna Daeron. The Lannisters are generous." He looked out at the lavish spectacle sprawled out before him. Daeron was not foolish enough to believe it was benevolence that was behind his future good family's actions. No, this was a display of their power, their wealth, their influence. Nor did he miss his spot within the spectacle. Seated high so that all in the Golden Hall could see the Lannisters' greatest treasure in the form of their betrothal with a Targaryen prince. "I'm more valuable than all this glittering gold." He looked down at his half-filled glass, and the thoughts that stewed within guided him to finish his wine in a single sip. His family has married into many of the great houses of Westeros, including Arryn, Baratheon, Martell, and Valerian, as well as smaller houses including Plum, Penrose, Blackwood, and Dane. Now another can be added into such lofty company, he thought wryly. His eyes were on the quiet servant who was kind enough to refill his drink without staring. He saw Jaime and Elia at their private table. In a crowded hall, they seemed content in the belief that they were the only ones in it. Daeron was impressed that his friend could put any food in his mouth the way his eyes were constantly on his bride, or his hands, or his lips. He smiled, pleased at his friend's happiness. Whatever his reservations on the Lannisters, he had none for his friend, Jaime. "Can I be this happy with my bride?" He mulled his question over another sip. "Prince Daeron." "Yes." He turned to see her eyes were on him. She was beautiful and elegant in her crimson dress. Between them sat Tyrion, a boy of 7. His attention on his plate where the food looked more to be played with than eaten. "I was thinking that when we reside in Summerhall," she began, and he did not miss the inflection change with a single word or the flicker in her emerald eyes, "that we would need a new standard." Indeed, he had come to a similar conclusion. "I thought a standard of a dragon with a lion to be ideal," she proposed with a hopeful gaze. He frowned, but hid it behind his wine glass as he took a sip to gather his thoughts. "The Lannister lion with my family's dragon." He knew of the Lannisters' pride, but for them to make such a proposal was stunning. "It was my family that forged these 7 kingdoms." His eyes found his family's sigil, large and black. It hung proudly. The red 3-headed dragon, monstrous in size, that inspired awe and dread in equal measures. He knew Princess Rhaenyra quartered her sigil to represent family's lines and allies, but this was not that. Cersei would have a lion and dragon together in a new banner, as if the Lannisters were equal to his family. A dragon and lion in combatant, but he saw the picture for what it would be. What was a lion to a dragon? He mused, a dragon has no equals. "Our standard will have a Targaryen dragon," he said slowly, "but there will be no lion." He put his nearly empty glass down. The goal of his future good family in pushing for more. They had the gold, now they wanted the dragon, the blood me. He scoffed, and I was not even their first choice. That bitterness roiled in his belly, feeding the growing annoyance he found at the Lannisters in their efforts for wanting more. They do not stop. My family is of royal blood, he said simply. A lion is not equal to a dragon. Her smile dipped. Something angry and ugly passed over her face in response. I see. Her voice was tight. If you'll excuse me, she turned to an oblivious Tyrion, helping him out of his seat. I promised my brother a dance. She lifted him into her arms and swept away from the table an angry sway of red silks and gold laces. Daeron watched her go and was not inclined to follow. My wife, he toasted her, draining what was left of his glass before putting it down in a display to show it was empty. The sweet taste was pleasant, helping to soothe his agitation. The servants were quick in reaction as another came forward to fill his glass, and he thanked them with a nod, and was pleased that they did not linger. He was not foolish. He knew that his castle was being built by Lannister men and funded by their gold, but it was the price they had to pay if they wanted a prince for a husband. They paid it happily and quickly. They were eager in wanting to form ties between the families. That should be reward enough. His eyes had followed his betrothed, who was dancing with her brother. Tyrion was in her arms as she guided him through the steps. There was no trace of anger in her face, her eyes glowed and she gave him nothing but smiles and kind words as they moved together. Daeron rubbed his eyes. His annoyance had receded somewhat in the face of how she handled herself with her brother. However, he knew beneath that veneer of his future wife lurked a fiery spirit that had him more enamored than anything. I've just been seared by it. And he knew it would not be the last time. She's as proud as they come, but the admission made his lips twitch. We shall have our share of Rose, he thought, due to their pride and stubbornness which they possessed in great quantity. He put aside the thoughts on his betrothed and that of his argument and turned towards his brother, whose attention was on the guests instead of the food on his plate. Or guest, he corrected with a growing smile to see Viserys had his eyes on the Dornish princess, Arianne Martell, Elya's niece and heir to Prince Doran. They were of the same age. However, while Viserys was a third son, she was the first daughter of the ruling Prince of Dorne. I shall get my brother his dance. He then scanned the hall until he found what he was looking for. Or who he was looking for. While I am in need of my own distractions. This is marvelous. They were on a private beach on the Sunset Sea. It was only accessible through a tunnel and a series of stairs that would not be fun to climb back up when they were done. A secluded strip of sand that gave the Lannisters all the benefits but with none of the hassle of interruptions. The sun's orange glow was fading, but its rays touched the waters to have them glistening with color. They had slipped away from the wedding after a rather stiff dance between himself and his betrothed. The idea and invitation having come from Cersei. Viserys had let out a cheer when they arrived. He had hastily removed most of his fine garments to swim in the shallows with an equally eager Tyrion. Both brothers were warned by their elder siblings to be careful and not foolish. Sir Gawain had the misfortune of having to be the one to stand closest to keep a watchful eye on the young prince. He removed his boots, socks, and his pale cloak before moving in position. Sir Arthur stood on guard at the beach with a handful of Lannister guards who came as escorts for Lord Tywin's children. Daeron had elected not to swim. Instead, he walked some of the beach. His betrothed at his side with Sir Barristan trailing them. They did not go far, both wanting to keep an eye on their brothers. The only sounds were that of the gulls above and of the laughter of Viserys and Tyrion, as they ran and splashed amidst the small waves. I am glad you like it, my prince, she replied formally. His eyes were looking past his betrothed to where Viserys had dunked his head when a wave passed over him. His brother emerged from it spitting water to an entertained Tyrion. Her tone pulled his attention back towards her. She looked breathtaking, he thought, her golden hair was caressed by a gentle gust. Her hairnet was bejeweled with emeralds and rubies that sparkled when the fading sun hit the gems. Daeron had heard some within Castle Rock call her the Light of the West, and seeing her here, he found it to be a fitting title. You spoke sincerely to me and I was unkind, he admitted, and for that you have my apologies. He saw that his words had her attention. We are to be man and wife, and I'd wish to hear your words. She was watching him silently, but her gaze did not linger, it drifted towards their brothers playing in the ocean. There will be no lion on our banner. He repeated his earlier words, and saw the expected and angry reaction it got from her, but before she could argue, he pressed on. You may not take my name when we marry, but our children will be Targaryens. You will be the mother of dragons. It felt odd to speak of such things that seemed so far into the future, but he thought they should be said in fairness to what was ahead of them. And we will have them be proud of that blood, and that of their mothers. She quietly thought on his words. I would like that, Daeron. Her lips smiling when they said his name. I am glad, Cersei. He returned her smile, and offered her his arm, which she took as they walked back towards their brothers. I wish for true words to be spoken between us, in all things. Could you give me that? I could. The glow of fading sunlight behind her made for a mesmerizing sight. The smile she wore as she watched her brother so happy and carefree felt warmer than the setting sun. I wish to thank you. It took him a heartbeat or more longer to respond than he should have needed, distracted by her beauty. What for? He recovered. I cannot speak of what sword skills I have or may learn, but you will always have my appreciation, she told him. You gave me a choice, and that means more to me than the sword you put in my hand. It will not be the last one, he assured her, understanding her sentiment. She surprised him when she stopped, but before he could ask why, she leaned forward and pressed a soft kiss upon his mouth. Her lips lingered for a few heartbeats before she pulled away. Her eyes were shimmering, and the small smirk that touched her face showed her own satisfaction of what had just transpired between them. Sir Barristan cleared his throat from where he stood behind them, reminding the pair that they were being watched and what was expected of them. That did not dim his smile. My lady has my thanks for such a tremendous gift. Cersei laughed, squeezing his arm. My betrothed will find that I can be quite generous. Her voice was soft, but the alluring promise beneath her words did not go unnoticed. The thoughts that conjured played far too quickly across his vision. In those seconds that followed, he felt Sir Barristan's eyes resting on the back of his head. The knight was resolute in his duties. Daeron felt it would be wiser to change the topic, otherwise he may find himself amidst temptation and trouble. He asked about her family and the beach, and knew it was the right question. He was rewarded with a retelling of several stories, all of which involved one or both of her siblings and the adventures and games they would play. She smiled throughout it all, her tone conveying the cherished memories she had of her brothers and the fun they had. It was clear how much she loved them both, and he found the smile she wore when speaking of these times more charming than any of the seductive ones she had tried before. What of you? She asked when she finished. He didn't answer right away. He looked out onto the sunset sea, its waves glittering like sapphires while the sun showered a ruby light onto the water. Her stories, while wonderful, brought a painful pang within his chest at the reminder of just how different hers was from his. Forgive me, she seemed to sense his disquiet. You do not. She stopped when he raised his hand. A scene or two sometimes comes to me of Rhaegar and myself, he quietly confessed. We are younger, perhaps Viserys' age, maybe a little older. I don't remember the game we played, but we were happy. Or I like to think we were. His eyes found his younger brother, who had playfully fallen backwards into the water after losing what looked to be a pretend duel against Tyrion. However, the truth is I do not know what I am seeing are actual memories, or dreams that I once conjured in the dying hope of my older brother wanting to be with me. He felt her hand slip from his arm, before taking his own where their fingers clasped together. The solemn reflection was broken by the sound of his brother's voice. Day. He turned to see his brother's hair was wet and wild, but he was grinning. Yes, Viserys. He felt his own smile at seeing his young and playful brother looking so happy. I need to tell you something. Tell me. From the corner of his eye he could see an amused Cersei watching quietly. Viserys shook his head. It's a secret. Despite his better judgment, Daeron approached his brother, who was still in the water, wading in the waves. He should have slipped off his boots and socks at least, but he did not. The tide rushed to greet him, reaching his shins before it receded. He saw Sir Gawain standing near while Tyrion was on Viserys' other side. His mismatched eyes following his movement with an alertness that didn't seem right for a 7-year-old. Viserys was now within arm's reach. The water was below Daeron's knees. He preferred not to linger, but in the back of his mind, he knew the truth of why Viserys had brought him so close. So when his brother pulled back his hands and then slapped them forward, bringing up water in a large splash, Daeron could only laugh when the cold, salty water drenched his face and the upper part of his tunic. He was not the only one. He heard the light laugh of his betrothed, who was standing safely on the beach. A chuckle escaped Segwayne, his sworn shield, who did not look the least bit bothered that his charge had just been attacked. "That is some secret, brother." Daeron brought the back of his arm to wipe away the wetness across his face. He looked down at Viserys, who was smiling up at him. "But alas, I have my own secret to tell." Daeron quickly grabbed his brother, who responded with a giggling protest that turned into a surprised squeal when he promptly tossed Viserys. He made a spectacular splash several feet away. Despite the cold and being wet, he joined Viserys not because he didn't suspect anything, but because he did. "I am not Rhaegar. I will not let Viserys have my childhood." Viserys' head bobbed up, laughing as he pushed his hair out of his eyes. "Again," he said before he even began to swim back towards him. "Me too," Tyrion insisted. He was standing beside Daeron. The water was over the boy's waist. He hesitated. The boy was older than Viserys, but he still held some quiet concern about obliging him. The resolve of that concern was quickly tested by how the boy's mismatched eyes were looking up at him. "That is up to your sister. You have her approval." She was walking into the tide, her red dress swirling with the water. She was still a few feet from them. Tyrion looked pleased and delighted, but Daeron wasn't sure if it was because she agreed or that she was joining them. Daeron had not missed the look that accompanied her answer, and he'd respect the unspoken request from her. Very well, he plucked Tyrion before the boy could blink, but he did let out a joyful shout when he hit the water. Daeron had been more careful in his throw, aiming him closer towards Cersei. The boy surfaced, laughing, water pouring down his cheeks. He wiped his eyes to protect them from the salt. Again, his hands slapping the water excitedly. "Me first." Viserys had reached him. He was pulling on his arm. Tyrion was coming to them, Cersei carefully at his side in case he struggled. She was watching him closely, but her vigilance did not soften her look or the fondness in her eyes. He remembered the stories Cersei told of her time with her brothers along this beach, and Daeron was thankful that Viserys would be lucky enough to have one of his own. Notes. Quick list of some liberties being taken. I kept the part of Robert getting Ned Land and Lordship vague, because why not, but did include that it probably required some favors to make it happen, or maybe it didn't, who knows. I clearly don't. I'm aware when the Monica Light of the West showed up, but I wouldn't put it past the Lannisters to give or encourage such names to be spoken about them. Why is Ned getting lands in the Stormlands instead of the North like Moat Cailin? Because this story is doing things differently. Maybe the moat isn't available or feasible in this universe. You'll never know. There's probably more, but just know this: if something in this story isn't matching canon, whether it be a character, plot, lore, etc., then 95% of the time it is a liberty, and I'm aware of it since I made it. Until next time. Spectre for Hire. Chapter 23, 281 AC, Vows. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. 281 AC. Arthur. The great hall smelled like charred meat. Scorch marks darkened parts of the tile, the last residue of the man who had been sentenced. His stomach riled. The sword of the morning was still not used to the king's new form of justice. Aerys had dismissed his headsmen and abandoned the gallows to those deemed traitors to the crown. They were now given over to wildfire. He will not be the king forever. He focused on the rhythm of his footsteps to move forward. He'll be an unfortunate footnote, he continued. Ahead of him was the reason why he held such confidence. The Crown Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, Aerys' eldest son and heir to the Iron Throne, walked calmly towards where his father was perched. Aerys will be lost in Rhaegar's light, a bright rain that will banish any darkness Aerys may have caused. Arthur believed it with every fiber in him. Rhaegar is the light. A light that should be shining now. He stopped instinctively when his friend slowed. There atop the Iron Throne sat Aerys Targaryen, the second of his name. Father Rhaegar bowed. Arthur did as well from where he stood. Rhaegar's show of obedience only brought a sneer to the king's lips. "You're late." He waved one of his hands. His fingertips were long and gnarled. Arthur followed the direction to see that others were in the great hall. It was Prince Daeron. He stood with Sir Barristan behind him. The two princes eyed each other in silence, but neither looked to give any form of acknowledgement to the other. At the foot of the Iron Throne stood Lord Commander Hightower and Sir Jonnet Hordeary. Your brother came promptly when summoned, Aerys hissed between puckered lips. Daeron understands his place, but you. He snapped his fingers. I don't believe you do, Roriger. I am sorry for the delay. Roriger's voice was soft, but plain in tone. I was seeing to Aegon. Aerys made a face at the mention of Roriger's son and heir. Aegon is not the king. He spat. I am. You are, Father Roriger intoned. You do not like that, do you? Aerys' lips pulled back to show yellow teeth within a dirty, stringy beard. You think you should be king? Arthur felt a cold drip down his back at the king's tone and words. He glanced to see his friend gave no reaction to his father's accusation. His eyes then moved to his sworn brothers who stood in the hulking shadow of the Iron Throne. They did not turn their heads. Don't! Aerys suddenly yelled, his high-pitched voice reverberating over the walls of the great hall. I do not wish to hear your lies. He stood from his throne. You are a thief and a disappointment. He took a step down. Mayhaps, we've put our faith in the wrong prince. The implication hung heavy and thick in the air like smoke. Arthur felt his face slack at what it was the king was saying. This time he saw his brothers in white could not hide their dismay at these words. The Lord Commander was frowning openly, but his expression could not be seen by their king. Do I have your attention now, Roriger? He asked with demented delight. He never let his eldest son answer, as he turned to where Daeron stood quietly off to the side. What do you say, my son? Shall I name you my heir and the crown prince of Westeros? Arthur saw Roriger's shoulders tense. His friend's face betraying his surprise at such a statement. He too could not believe what the king was suggesting. To name another heir over his eldest, he wanted to shake his head. Madness. It's madness. Thankfully, the Lord Hand was not present, for surely that would be a dangerous idea that the Lion would never release. If Lord Tywin knew of such a chance, then Arthur dreaded to think what would happen to the Seven Kingdoms. War. He felt his chest clench. He knew Roriger would fight for his claim and the rights of his son, and he had allies, but so too did Prince Daeron. Arthur did not want to admit it, but Roriger's brothers' allies were strong and if called upon by the prince would surely raise their banners for him. Prince Daeron stepped forward, before he knelt towards his father. His form swallowed up by the Iron Throne's shadow. He did not look to revel in such a reward, but nor did he refuse it. I serve the crown, father. The prince's voice was flat. That seemed to please the king. My son is a true servant to his king. Aerys clapped his hands together. With one order, my boy, I could name you my heir. You would follow me as the next king of the Seven Kingdoms. Aerys spared Roriger a look, and did not hide the mean glee that shone in his eyes. Arthur looked to Roriger to see his friend was watching this in stony silence, but his eyes were hard and his lips pursed together. However, it was not his father he was glaring at, but his brother. A king, my son is more powerful than any law. Aerys' words were spoken to Daeron, but the threat was to Roriger. Your brother assumes too much of his place. Aerys' tone was as venomous as the Dornish snakes that Arthur had avoided in his youth. He has grown content. Aerys was down to the last steps. Do you remember what the Conqueror said of his role? That a king should never sit easy, Daeron recited. Aerys gave an imperious nod. A lesson your brother has forgotten. Fresh cuts could be seen on Aerys' palms and wrists. He stopped on the last step. Behind him, the Iron Throne stood like a massive and ugly beast, scaled and poised to strike. To make you a king, Aerys surmised aloud, would mean your wife would be the next queen. His face scrunched up in sudden dislike of the notion. A Lannister queen. He shook his head. If I was denied one. It does not seem fair that you are to have one. He did not wait for Daeron to respond before turning back to Roriger. Do you understand me now, my son? Aerys' mouth was cruel. I do, Father. Roriger dipped his head. Then make sure you do not repeat this disappointment. Aerys looked him over, eyes hooded with contempt. I am your king. Spittle dribbled down his lips. Do not keep me waiting for some brat again. He rounded, his fists shaking angrily at his side. Or Lannister queen or not, I shall name Daeron, my heir. Aerys let out a shrill laugh, seemingly amused at the prospect of what that would lead to. Now I have other matters to attend to. He turned to the Lord Commander. Inform the Queen that I require her presence. Of course, Your Grace. Lord Commander Hightower gave a stiff bow and left. By your leave, Father Roriger bowed, and with a sharp nod from his father dismissed him. He turned and left without sparing his brother a look. Arthur was quick to follow his friend, but even as he left the great hall, he could not escape the cold dread he felt form in his gut at what had just transpired. Aerys would not settle for watching men burn. He realized to his horror, he'd let the Seven Kingdoms burn. You summoned me. Arthur found the Crown Prince in his chambers within the Red Keep. The table was covered by tomes, some open, some not. Two of the tall windows were open, which allowed a soft breeze to come into the room, flickering some of the pages when there was a strong gust. His friend, Roriger, was standing by one of the open windows. He looked every inch a king, Arthur thought, dressed in his black tunic, rich embroidery and red laces with silver pins and a brooch of his family's three-headed dragon. I did. That was when Roriger turned to him. He offered him a small smile, but it did not settle on his lips. A look of contemplation soon replaced whatever happiness he felt upon seeing Arthur. You leave in the morning. I do. Arthur was headed to Storm's End for his sister's marriage to Ned Stark, the newly named Lord of the Rainwood. His brother had wanted her to marry Roriger, while his friend had wanted her to marry his brother. In the end, his sister was married to neither prince but to a second son of House Stark. The only one happy of this arrangement was Ashera, Arthur thought dryly. Aware of his sister's affection for Eddard Stark and how he had been the target of her desire from the very beginning. It had never been princes that she wanted, but him. He took comfort in knowing that this Eddard Stark felt just as strongly for her. He was traveling with a retinue that included Prince Daeron and his betrothed Lady Cersei. Many guests had already gathered at Storm's End, including Lord Jon Arryn, Jaime Lannister and his wife, Elia, Eddard Stark's younger siblings, Benjen and Lyanna. It was said that members of House Tully may be traveling too, with Brandon Stark accompanying them, as he was betrothed to Lord Tully's eldest daughter. After the wedding, Prince Daeron, his betrothed and his retinue would be traveling to Summerhall, their future seat. They were to inspect the work that had been done this past year. And to judge of its condition, if it was in a good state and the king was pleased, a wedding would soon follow between the prince and the Lord Hand's daughter. Our houses share common kin, Roriger remarked, pushing Arthur's thoughts away from Summerhall and back to his friend. Targaryen and Stark have married into House Blackwood. He gestured to one of the open tomes in front of him. There was once a pact made between our families. He moved away from the window and towards one of his prized books. It was called The Pact of Ice and Fire. His eyes held a certain haze at those words. It has yet to be fulfilled. Arthur wisely stayed quiet. He was not one for diligent reading like his friend, and trusted the prince in matters of learnings and knowledge. He believed the crown prince studied more than most maesters. Aegon is the prince that was promised. Roriger reached for a pitcher of wine and, without asking, poured 2 glasses. It is foretold. He handed one of them to Arthur. He thanked him with a nod, but did not partake. How is your son? He is well, Roriger answered simply. He is with my wife and my mother. He looked down at his glass. Aegon does not know the fate we are burdened with, but such innocence cannot last forever. His long fingers pulled the glass to his lips and he took a small sip. To Aegon VI, Arthur prompted, raising his glass, let him be as fine a king as his father will be. He was pleased to see a flicker of approval come across his friend's face at those words, before he nodded and drank another small sip at Arthur's toast. The knight drank as well and was not surprised by the sweet vintage, since it was one of his Roriger's favorites. I need your vow, my friend. What? Arthur looked to see his friend's face set with resolved purpose. Are you my man? Roriger asked quietly. He is the prince, not the king, a small voice whispered inside him. You are a knight of the Kingsguard. He pushed down that reminder. Roriger will be king soon. It is in him we must trust and serve. I am, my prince. He put his glass down swiftly and gave the king he'd gladly follow a proper bow. Think carefully, my friend Roriger said cautiously, you must swear to me. To keep my trust and counsel in all things. To never share what is spoken between us. Arthur, still bowing, thought over his friend's warning, but he felt no hesitation. Despite the other vows he may have made, this one would overshadow them all. By following Roriger I can honor the vows I first swore as a knight and then a member of the King's Guard. He told himself, the trials of Varys reign were wearing on him. I've watched him burn men alive and stayed quiet, he thought sadly. I stood outside his door while the queen was raped. I did not move because the raper was my king. His stomach twisted, and he felt the familiar lash of loathing writhe within him. Roriger will change all this. He is what is good for the realm. He is what a king should be. To serve Roriger I can set things right. I swear. Arthur knelt before his friend and crown prince of the Seven Kingdoms. He felt Roriger's shadow fall upon him. He looked up to see Roriger had a small smile, but he was holding a sheathed sword. He understood, and clasped his hands around the hilt of said weapon and felt Roriger's hands atop his. Arthur made his vow a second time without hesitation, swearing himself to serve and honor Roriger above all things. Aemon the Dragon Knight, Duncan the Tall, Ryam Redwine, his heart going over some of the greatest knights to have donned the white cloak and served the Iron Throne. Let them understand. He prayed quietly to both the father and the warrior. This is for the greater good. Rise, Sir Arthur, Roriger asked him after a few heartbeats of silence. Arthur did. I had no doubts, my friend, he assured him. Come with me. Roriger guided him to one of the balconies adjoined to his chambers. Arthur followed, taking his glass with him. A few seats were out for guests to sit and bask in either sunlight or moonlight. A small table placed between two of the chairs. Neither man moved to take one of them. Roriger had settled for leaning against the railing, his glass beside him. My father is a difficult man, Roriger sighed, but he is not the threat to my realm. My prince. Roriger raised an eyebrow, something akin to amusement passing over his face. You know it too, my friend. Your brother wants no crown. Arthur defended the prince, he just wanted a brother. His loyalty to Roriger stopped himself from adding. It was not his place to speak on such things. His friend had reason for doing what he did. Roriger often said, my path is not an easy one to tread, but still I must walk it in order to serve this realm. And with that choice to ignore his brother, Arthur noted, Roriger will never understand him. He thought of the two brothers and the strangers they've become to one another. There was more he wanted to say, but he hesitated. Arthur was aware at how his next words could be construed, but for the future of the kingdoms he swore to protect he had to say them. If your father. No, Roriger's voice was suddenly sharp, and he raised his hand. I cannot move against him. Why, my prince? Arthur didn't understand. It is not the time, Roriger answered with a hint of impatience. Only with the three heads can I act in that regard. Arthur frowned, but did not speak. He mulled over his friend's mysterious words. They were not the first ones he heard from Roriger. The prince spoke cryptically of plans and prophecies, destinies and fate, and the terrible burdens that lay ahead of him that he must face. The meanings behind them were puzzling to Arthur, but the prince believed in them fully, and that confidence helped to ease Arthur's concern. And yet in this matter he could not understand his friend's refusal. For the greater good, he reminded himself, and may the seven understand and forgive me. The Lord see you as their king. Though he stopped himself, he may be the utmost loyal to Roriger, but he still felt improper for insulting the king he swore a vow to protect. And now I've given my vow to Roriger. Arthur would not let the voice plant any further seeds of doubt. I am loyal to the crown. Roriger is next to rule. He is destined to rule. He is the light the kingdoms need. With that in mind, he continued, the king can be. I said no. Roriger dismissed, a sudden burst of anger polluting his quiet and soft tone. That is not the proper course. The anger had been replaced with an absolute firmness in his belief. Regardless, it sets a dangerous precedent. If I am to move against my father, then what stops my brother from removing me? Roriger shook his head. No, my path is clear. I know what I must do. I understand. Arthur lied, but he found no alternative. He was not a man for debate and speeches. This was not his realm, but his friend's, and he had put all of his trust in Roriger. I cannot take it back now. And I do not want to. Roriger studied him coolly for a few heartbeats, before looking satisfied. He then turned away. My father's threat are shadows on the wall. His words are that of a wind blown on the last breaths of an angry, but dying storm. They do not concern me. He picked up his glass and took a measured sip. What concerns me is my brother. Roriger looked him over closely, but Arthur was still in his stance. He did not even blink despite the discomfort he felt, a small, cold creep up his back at what they were discussing. A marriage between him and House Lannister cannot come to pass. Prince Daeron would, but he quieted his protest at the sharp look from his friend. I have reason to believe that my brother is doing the very thing you're about to tell me he isn't. What? Arthur was startled by this. It didn't seem possible. He did not know Prince Daeron well, but he knew him enough to know he was not an ambitious man. Indeed, Roriger sensed his dismay. My brother has never forgiven me against these supposed slights I've inflicted upon him. His tone lacked emotion. Now, the Lannisters use those grievances for their own greed. Treason, Arthur whispered, feeling a roiling in his stomach for what that single word truly entailed. Yes, Roriger's eyes showed nothing when they faced him. Those I trust are gathering facts to show my brother's true intentions. He brushed some of his silvery hair out of his face. Baratheon, Stark, Lannister, Martell, he listed them simply, but the hand resting on the railing curled tightly into a fist. These friendships could not fool me. My brother plots and stews under delusions that he calls injustices. He gave a sad smile. Daeron the delusional, he recited, his voice taking on a lilt that the crown prince favored for when he sang with his harp. What will you do? Arthur pushed down the foreboding that tried to coil itself around him. My brother's power must be cut, and his plot must be revealed. Prince Daeron would proclaim his innocence. He has that right. Roriger did not seem the least bit bothered by it. He will demand a trial by combat, Arthur pointed out, and I cannot fight him. No one in the King's Guard can. I am aware. Roriger watched him, but his face betrayed nothing. He could try to demand a trial by 7, Arthur argued, and he knew many of the prince's friends would surely come to his aid. Jaime Lannister and Robert Baratheon among them, and Arthur could not name a handful of better warriors in all the kingdoms that were not draped in white. What force could Roriger call upon to fight such great warriors? There will be no trial, and my brother will not die, Roriger said in a calming voice as if trying to soothe his son to sleep. He will be exiled. I am no kinslayer. I can be merciful and with this threat handled. My brother may live out in Essos without the burdens I must carry. Why won't there be a trial? Arthur could not understand his friend's confidence. Because my father has picked a new champion for the crown on the matters of treason, Roriger explained. Wildfire. Barristan. He could not help but think on the king's words. No, his threats, he corrected, on trying to bypass Roriger to make Daeron the next king. Dark days are upon us, he feared. They left the Great Hall in silence after Aerys' proclamations and promises. Barristan walked behind his squire, but in the glances he saw of the prince, Daeron showed no sign of his father's words having gripped him. There was no gleam in his eyes on potential kingship nor smiles of future triumphs of sitting upon the Iron Throne. The only sound in the corridors were that of their footfalls, patting against the stone floor. In this silence, Barristan wrestled with uncertainty. Should I say something? Should I do something? He kept walking. This is not my place. This is not my role. A familiar voice played in his mind, one that has cautioned and consoled him more times than he could count these last few years, trying as they were. You should have let the king die in Duskendale, a new and cold voice whispered inside him. All the spilled blood that follows is on your hands, Barristan Selmy. Sir Barristan. My prince. He blinked and recovered to see Prince Daeron had stopped and turned in his direction. It only took him a heartbeat to realize his mistake. He had went down the wrong corridor and had stopped following his charge. My prince, he said again, quickly coming to him. My apologies. He bowed his head in shame, quietly berating himself for allowing such a distraction to blind him from his duties. Prince Daeron regarded him before nodding. It is all right. He assured him, his lips pressed as if he had more to say, but conflict lurked beneath his eyes. My father has a way of distracting us, even our most loyal servants. I was remiss in my duties. Sir Barristan would not allow the fault to go to anyone but him. It shall not happen again. Then I shall have you walk beside me. Daeron smiled, proving his words were a jest and not a reprimand. I would be honored. He was grateful for the prince in his understanding. I cannot be permitted such distractions. My role is to guard the prince, he told himself, trying to simplify what he could do so as to not allow his mind to wander in such dark turns in efforts to dishearten or distract him from the role he must carry as a knight of the Kingsguard. I serve the crown. 4 words that were once an honor to utter, but now. No, he stomped down on that treacherous thought more akin to a serpent before it could coil itself around him and sink its fangs into his heart. He took his spot beside the prince as they continued in their steps through the corridor. Where are we off to, my prince? He hoped a good conversation would give him a needed reprieve. To see the Lady Circea. He did not try to hide his grin at his answer. I should have guessed, Barristan replied dryly, pleased at the chuckle it got from his squire. He was not too rehearsed in courtship, having given up that life, that chance when he turned down the lordship and betrothed that awaited him at Harvest Hall. So watching it unfold between the prince and the Lady Circea had been an interesting, but challenging endeavor. The two were adamant in spending time together, and etiquette demanded chaperones to be attending the couple at all times. Sir Barristan, as a Kingsguard knight, was one of many who had served as one and learned quickly enough that the two needed to be watched diligently. It was a more taxing ordeal than he expected. They seemed to conspire frequently to try to lose their chaperones to allow them privacy. Kingsguard vow or not, he understood what fueled those attempts and what the two sought once they were alone. Their efforts at eluding the chaperones assigned to them by both the Crown and Lord Tywine had never been truly successful, but that did not stop them from trying. If it wasn't his responsibility, Barristan may have found it a bit more amusing. The prince was young and his betrothed was a beautiful woman. He would not begrudge his squire such thoughts or temptations, though he only wished the prince had a bit more restraint on them. He's given me more headaches these last few months than he ever did in all his years as my squire. Prince Daeron, a servant dressed in Targaryen livery, came forward carrying a sheathed sword. It was delivered while you were with the king, my prince. Daeron smiled, looking at the sword before the servant. Well done. He took the sword from the servant whose head remained bowed. Pay him, the prince instructed. A Targaryen guard from his retinue stepped forward and deposited the coins into the servant's hand. My prince is generous, he stammered. That was when the prince turned his eyes away from the sword and onto the grateful servant. I reward good service. He replied with a kind smile, thank you, that will be all. The servant did not need to be told twice. Clutching his coins, he scurried off, but not before giving Prince Daeron a deep bow. Come, Sir Barristan, look at this. He handed over the newly forged sword. The sheath was unremarkable, but the hilt was not. Its crossguard was of a fierce dragon meeting a ferocious lion. The eyes of the dragon were amethysts and the lion were emeralds. This is remarkable, my prince. Sir Barristan admired the work that had gone into the craft. He then pulled the sword slowly from its sheath. A soft hiss slipped through, the steel shimmered when the light hit it. Well made, indeed. It is not Valyrian, but it is a fine steel, Prince Daeron noted from where he stood. It is shaped like mine. He placed a hand on the sheathed Dark Sister, the famous Targaryen sword. It is. Sir Barristan was not surprised by that, given the recipient for the gift, as well as seeing the sword's slender blade and the design of its hilt. It was forged for a woman's hand. It is a great gift, my prince. The Lady Circea did not practice as frequently as her betrothed, but she's progressed steadily in her skill. He had watched her train when she visited the capital. She had some talent, but he did not think she had the patience to truly excel. She was prone to get frustrated when she could not learn a move quickly enough. Anger and annoyance made her words sharper than any forged sword. Regardless of his thoughts on her temperament, he thought she worked hard and had earned the challenge of practicing with real steel. Barristan was not sure who would be prouder, her or the prince. He sheathed the sword and made an effort to return it to the prince, who shook his head. I wish to surprise, my lady. Prince Daeron's eyes sparkled mischievously while he smiled. Will you hold it until it is needed? Of course, my prince, Barristan answered, understanding the prince's intentions. She will thank you for it. He did not miss a certain flicker that passed over the prince's face at those words. It never ceases, he thought wryly, prepared for his duties to chafe the prince in his effort to observe propriety between a young couple who seemed more eager for scandal. They picked up their pace in silence, heading in the direction of the Tower of the Hand where Lady Circea had her rooms. Despite his struggles to ensure the prince and his betrothed behaved themselves, the two were not without their problems. Barristan had witnessed them quarrel countless times. Her quick anger and the prince's stubbornness, among their faults which when clashed formed a volatile reaction, but it never lingered over them for too long. He was not certain a spat between them lasted more than a day before the two were reconciled and eager to make amends for slights given. Eager indeed, he smiled. Sir Barristan. I am ready, my prince. He stepped backwards when Prince Daeron neared the Lady Circea's doors. He made sure to hide the sword from the lady's view. Did Sir Aemon have to perform such antics? Barristan wondered in quiet amusement while watching the scene unfold in front of him. The knocking was quick and loud. It was not Sir Barristan's place to observe that the prince looked a bit anxious while he waited for his betrothed to answer. My prince. Lady Circea was standing in the doorway in a simple red gown, but it did not diminish her beauty. The bright smile she wore at the sight of her betrothed made her stunning. My lady. From where he stood, he could not see the prince's features, but Barristan suspected the look he was giving his betrothed. This is unexpected. She did not look the least bit bothered by the prince's unannounced visit. I hope this is not an inconvenience for you. Never, she said quickly to perish the notion. Her hand then curled around his arm. Before she could go further to assure her prince, that was when she noticed him for the first time. Sir Barristan. My lady. He bowed his head. Aware that his presence was probably unwelcomed by them, but it was warranted nonetheless. I have a gift for you, my lady. Oh. Her green eyes were curious, and her lips curved upwards in anticipation. Barristan stepped forward and carefully handed the sword over to the prince to ensure the hilt remained hidden from Lady Circea's gaze. He then watched silently at how she reacted to the gift. She first exclaimed loudly and happily, admiring the blade in equal parts dismay and awe. She rambled about its beauty and its brilliance. The lady thanked her prince profusely for such a gift, promising to treasure it. She then leaned in and kissed him. Having decided that words were not enough to express her gratitude. Not at all surprised, Barristan was lenient on his timing to intrude. He gave them a brief moment before he cleared his throat. It was in this moment that he was grateful in knowing that he would not be attending them for the wedding in the Stormlands. They'll be Gwain's problem, and Arthur's, and with that Barristan smiled. Notes. Ned being named Lord of the Rainwood does not mean he is the liege lord to those lords, just like the Lord of the Marches isn't the liege lord to the other Marcher lords. It's just his title for his new seat that Robert gave him. Also sorry Davos. Chapter 24, Storm. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. 281 AC. Lysa. It is a pity that Lord Brandon is not able to join us. Lysa turned in her seat from where she was looking out the window to the woman sitting across from her, Cersei Lannister. Her words had been directed to Lysa's sister, Cat, who sat on Lysa's other side. It is her sister showed the expected disappointment that she could not be with her betrothed. Lysa had been surprised that the Lady Circea had spoken. The Lord Hand's daughter had been quiet for much of the trip. She'd speak when spoken to, and remained cordial in her answers, but did little to expand on anything she said. Lysa thought she looked distracted with something, but she wasn't bold or foolish enough to ask what it was. You should tell her, Cat. Lysa encouraged her sister, and saw her words had piqued Circea's interest. It is nothing, Lysa, her sister dismissed in a gentle tone that dripped with demureness. No, it is, she insisted. Brandon's friend, Elbereth, came to Riverrun at Cat's betrothed's behest. With letters too thick for ravens to carry. She saw a bit of red in Cat's cheeks. Lysa had only heard some of them that her sister deigned to read to her. It was all so wonderful, she thought, hearing Brandon's tender apologies and other sweet words. That was kind of him. Circea's tone was bland, but her smile seemed real. Who is this Elbereth? Elbereth, Lysa was all too pleased to answer. He is a distant Arin, she continued, and denies her until her words and thoughts trailed off while heat came to her cheeks, until we have children, still unable to hide the blush that remained no doubt across her face. She did not think it fair she had to wait at least another year to be married. I'm not frail, she had told her father, but he would hear nothing of her words no matter how true they were. I can give him sons now. Lysa could feel it in her blood. In her bones. She was ready. I can be brave, he loves me, I can help him. Why must we wait? She lamented the unfairness of it. She knew her body better than her father or Maester. She put aside her disappointment but stayed on the topic due to recent gossip she had heard from some of the guards in the prince's retinue. I heard that the princess may be pregnant again. Lysa wasn't sure she should trust such sources, but she was tired of the quiet that had been plaguing her for most of this trip. Now that they were all talking, she did not want it to end and for silence to once more reign. That was boring, and she could only look out the window of their carriage for so long without getting a bit nauseous. The bumpiness of the road did little to soothe her protesting belly. A child is a blessing, Kat intoned, looking and sounding so wise. Her back was straight, her hands folded in her lap. Her auburn hair wonderfully braided, and her blue eyes were kind and thoughtful in their gaze. Circe favored her with a polite smile, but added nothing to the conversation. The crown prince would be pleased, Lysa agreed quickly. I cannot wait to please my husband, she thought dreamily of her and Denies together. Her wonderful thoughts of her perfect betrothed came to a halt just as the wheels beneath her slowed to one as well. What is it? Kat asked. Lysa looked out the window, but saw nothing of interest. She saw a few Targaryen guards milling about. Their answer came shortly, and it began with the sound of a polished knock on their door. It then opened to show the genial face of Sir Gawain Gaunt, who offered them a polite smile and the proper courtesies. Apologies, ladies, he raised his head after dipping it to them in greeting. Part of our escort has gone too far ahead. Our caravan has stretched out. Do you know how long it will take, Sir Gawain? Circe asked the knight. Not terribly long, my lady, he answered, a sly smile slipped in under his bushy mustache. Is there a message I shall take to the prince for you, my lady? The Lady Circe did not seem surprised or scandalized by the knight's informal question or his tone. She replied with a sincere smile and shook her head. I wouldn't dare make you blush, Sir Gawain, she teased, green eyes dazzling in mirth. Red does not suit you nearly as well as white. Gawain laughed. I shall inform the prince then that he is in your thoughts. He winked. Ladies, he bowed to them and left. My betrothed was right in his name for him. Circe was still smiling. Gawain the gossip, indeed. Her lingering amusement did not flicker out for another few heartbeats. That was when the first shout could be heard. What was that? Her sister's question was answered not by them, but by a chorus of loud noises that seemed to be coming from all directions. Lysa looked to the window and felt her belly drop at what she saw. Men. Her heart flickering in her chest like a frightened and caged bird. Attack. It was terrible. Coming out of the woods were armed men. They looked dangerous and demented, as if they'd just escaped the seven hells. Arrows fell upon their carriage like the first raindrops of a storm. Lysa screamed. They are trying to kill us. Lysa felt the fear that coiled itself around her lungs and squeezed tightly. What? Lady Circe had moved across the cushions when Lysa couldn't muster her voice to answer. We will be safe, Kat assured them, holding Lysa's hand and squeezing. We have men to protect us. The sound of steel clashing against one another wasn't as reassuring. Shouts and curses, and clangs of metal made for terrifying sounds that had Lysa trembling. It's too close. It's too close. She felt tears on her cheeks. Make it stop. Make it stop. The men are scattered. Lysa's voice was strangled, remembering why they had stopped in the first place. We're doomed. The fear was heavy and pressing against her face, trying to smother her. We are protected by the best men in the kingdoms. Lady Circe did not share Lysa's opinion. She is right, her sister quickly agreed. Uncle Brynden is out there. Kat's hand remained tightly wrapped around Lysa's. Denies too. Denies. It came out more as a screech, but now she feared for him with all this fighting happening around them. Protect Denies, she prayed. Protect us, she repeated her prayers. She closed her eyes so that she could pretend that she was back in the September at Riverrun. He cannot die. It could not happen. I need to give him sons. He can't be taken. More arrows fell upon their carriage which punctured the calming image Lysa was trying to project. Please no, she said to herself, please. A finger of light could be seen shining above them, and for one glorious heartbeat, she thought her prayers were being answered, but when she looked up, she discovered to her horror it was not the touch of the gods they felt, but man. An arrow had poked through, punching through the wood. Lysa leaned back. She felt dizzy. She closed her eyes and slowly counted to 10 in hopes to banish the dizziness that covered her like an unwanted veil. It's Segwayne. Circe's voice was filled with such hope that it got Lysa to open her eyes to look. She was right. The knight of the King's Guard looked valiant in his white plate armor while he moved towards them. His sword was already blooded by the fiends who thought to attack them. Protect the prince. He shouted as he dispatched a foolish bandit who thought to stab him when his back was turned. Protect the carriage. He moved with surprising calmness given the expected chaos that was all around him. We're safe. Caitlin didn't hide her relief. He was only steps away from them. We're safe. For the first time Lysa allowed herself to feel safe. A gargled shout broke through her confidence. She looked through the window to her horror to see Segwayne was stumbling forward, which was how she spotted the cause. An arrow. Her heart sank and fresh tears were falling down her cheeks. The King's Guard knight and their protector had been hit. He fell to his knees first, and then the ground before he could reach them. Open the door. Circe demanded. What? Lysa shrieked, unable to understand such madness. Circe didn't look the least bit scared. Open the door, she repeated with a sharp edge in her voice. I will not allow them to butcher Segwayne. Lysa turned to Cat for an answer. Her sister always knew what to do, but Cat seemed silently stunned at Quain's unexpected fall. Circe moved out of her seat to get to the door. No. Lysa tried to swat her hand away. You can't. I can. Circe's growling response made Lysa instinctively lean away, and that was all the Lady Circe needed to open the door. The screams and shouts were terrible. They were so loud, but it was the groans and cries that pierced Lysa to her bones. The wailing of the dying. Please let that not be Denise. Lysa covered her ears, but it all bled through. Please protect Denise. I need help. Circe had moved halfway out of the carriage to grab Quain's arms and was trying to pull him into the safety of their carriage. We need to close the door. Lysa insisted. He lives. Circe snapped, now help me. Cat moved first. She recovered swiftly from her brief lapse of stillness and came alongside Circe to help grab the groaning Segwayne. They grunted while they tried to pull him inside. The man's dead weight and armor made it no easy thing. Lysa was continuing her silent prayer when she moved to join them. Her fingers were trembling when they found a purchase to grip around his back. She then pulled with all her might. She felt her arms shaking, but the three of them were slowly doing it. It was a few more seconds of struggling before he was brought in and was unceremoniously left on the floor, muddied and blooded, but he was inside. She felt the wetness before she saw it. Her fingers were sticky with blood. She must have touched a part of his wound. Lysa's belly rolled, and the taste of bile burned in her throat. She climbed over the fallen knight, and just as her face reached the outside, she heaved. Tears blurred her vision, and her body shuddered. Cat's hands were on her back. First they were soothing, but then they became insistent and firm. Her sister was pulling her out of the way so that they could close the door. Lysa did not resist, reeling from her sickness. Exhausted, and scared, that was when she saw one of their attackers had noticed the open door. He had dark eyes and his face was dirted, and his sword was red. She felt the disgust in her belly at the slow look he gave her before he licked his lips. He was quick in his steps to close the distance between them. He was standing not yet close enough to grab them, but in the way of them being able to close the door. Some treasures are in gold, even his voice was hard and mean, and some are in flesh. Lysa was going to be sick again. Her stomach stirred as she sagged in her seat. Her eyes were bleary, and what followed felt more like a dream, but she watched it unfold as if in some detached trance. The man put one of his hands on the door frame to steady and then pull himself inside. A flash of steel struck forward like a bolt of lightning. A startled cry followed. He cursed and stumbled backwards as a splash of red blocked Lysa's vision for a heartbeat, drenching her and Segwayne. The source of the cut was a sword. Its wielder the Lady Circea. She then pulled the blade out and slashed at the confused and wounded man a second time. The sound of steel cutting through flesh had never sounded so sweet to Lysa's ears. She saw glimpses of the ferocious dragon and lion along the sword. Their fury had been roused by this interloper. Their fangs were tasting blood. The man's yelp was silenced as the sword sunk deeper into him. The body lulled forward, and went creepily still, like the strings of a puppet having been suddenly cut. Lady Circea's eyes were dark and blazing while her mouth was determined. She looked at their would-be raper while she pulled the sword out of him. His body collapsed into a heap, hanging partly inside their carriage. She kicked his body to the ground. The thud sound it made was quite satisfying. One hand holding a blooded sword, with the other Circea closed their door and then locked it. "Lysa, you're bleeding." Kat's worried voice pulled Lysa's eyes away from the fearsome-looking Cersei Lannister and onto her worried sister. "No," she muttered. Her tongue felt thick and her dreamlike days only made her more sick. Her empty stomach churned in warning. It's not my blood." Her voice sounded so far away. "Where am I going?" The last thing she saw before darkness came to her were tears in her sister's eyes. Lyanna. The solar in Storm's End was filled with warmth and laughter, friends, and family. Their host, the Lord of Storm's End, was sitting comfortably on one of the couches by the hearth. Perched on his knee was his natural daughter, Maya Storm. The girl was grinning and giggling, thoroughly entertained by her father's antics, which varied from bouncing precariously on his knee to being tossed up in the air with him catching her deftly each time. Lyanna did not know who was laughing more, Robert or Maya. Sitting on one side of their host was Elia Lannister. The Dornish princess turned Lannister wife looked on amused, while occasionally cautioning Robert that some restraint is never a bad thing, especially when it comes to one's own children. Jaime Lannister was leaning against the wall, grinning. His green eyes turning between the flying Maya and back to his wife. Japing while he watched, only Robert could find baby tossing an enjoyable sport. Robert's eyes flickered to Jaime before tossing his daughter into the air, who let out an excited squeal. "You sound surprised, Lannister." The Lord of Storm's End caught his daughter with ease before sharing a chuckle with Jaime. At the table where Lyanna was currently sitting, she was across from her brother's foster father, Jon Arryn. An old, but kind man who was currently engaged in a conversation with Ned's bride-to-be, Ashera. She could not hear what was being discussed, but it seemed an amusing topic given Jon's smiling and Ashera's laughter. It was Ned's reaction to their conversation that clued Lyanna into what was being discussed. He did not. Ashera asked in between her giggling when Jon Arryn finished an apparent story that featured Ned. He did. Jon answered with a fond smile that helped to ease the traces of the age lines on his face. "Why wasn't I told this?" Ashera teased, turning to Ned, who seemed undecided if he should be amused or annoyed given the stories his foster father was sharing. "It was not prudent," Ned replied with a shrug, but his small smile and his tone sent the three of them into another round of laughter. Benjen had slipped off to bed, as had the younger Renly, while Robert's other brother never made an appearance. Had there been some recent row between the brothers? She wondered, trying to find a reason to explain such rigidness between Robert and his younger brother, Stannis. It was Robert's rumbling voice that brought a halt to her thoughts and for them all to come back together into a single conversation. Fearless, he praised his daughter. She was a girl of 2 or 3, Lyanna was not certain. "She gets that from me." "In your case we call it reckless," Elia corrected. "She's clever too." "So are we sure she's yours?" Jaime asked. The jest earned a ripple of laughter throughout the room, but Robert's was the loudest. "I'll show you." His large hand rested gently on her shoulder, helping to guide her line of sight so she could see Ned. "Who's this?" Her blue eyes sparkled in thought, smiling. "Uncle Ned." Maya. Robert agreed with a grin. Only Robert would encourage his daughter to call his friends uncles instead of what was appropriate or expected. Lyanna felt her own lips twitch at how Maya not only saw her own brother, but Robert's handling of her. It was a strange sight to see this fearsome warrior, and a man whose infamy was centered around his promiscuity, could be such a doting father, especially when it's with his natural daughter. And his house. Maya's face scrunched up in concentration for a heartbeat, before she put her head back and howled. Her imitation of a wolf's howl brought amusement and acclaim from all those watching. Robert was smirking when he tousled his daughter's curls. "That's right, Maya," he said proudly before turning in his seat so she could see Jamie and Uncle Jamie. Robert asked her, "What's his house?" Maya's blue eyes seemed to narrow and her lips pouted as she took in Jamie's appearance. It took her only a second or more before deciding. She let out a roar. Impressive. Jamie's praise made her face light up. "I told you Robert's smugness was more endearing than it should have been."